In the world, several towers appeared in all the countries, and whoever managed to climb them and clear the dungeons received fortunes unimaginable. Our own protagonist was a normal person until he joined the adventure through a portal. But nothing happened as he expected. Instead of going to the first floor, he ended up on an unknown floor inside a cave, and there he would have to survive by farming and making his way. However, he wasn't alone. He had his own companions. He met Adam in this new endeavor, so I hope you like it. So leave a like if you do and subscribe to the channel. They had multiple adventures gathered in one location. Suddenly, they are called by some creature, and that cat in boots catches their attention. He asks if they wouldn't like to see some goods he had that were extra special. They didn't understand much when they heard that this was a wandering merchant cat and were impressed that an animal had come to them. The blond boy asks what he was selling, and the cat shows them a tomato. The boy is very disappointed, saying he expected something better, like a legendary weapon or something of that sort. They can't believe he only had tomatoes, and that they could eat something like that any time. But the cat mocks them, saying he knew they would react like that, and explains that it's not a normal tomato, it's different. Who were harvesting those vegetables and says they would rest now. After a while, it's crushing those cherry tomatoes, and he asks a little bee that was there to put a little honey for him. She puts it on, and it starts to shake that glass, which will turn into a type of juice. All the rabbits and the protagonists start to drink like it's a celebration. Let's show you what that drink is all about. It's called a vitality drink, which in this case was honey and cherry tomatoes. Silver is happy because, apparently, that drink was very good. Suddenly, a window appeared saying that he had gained an additional mission, and the mission was for him to distribute the water with honey to the administrators of the tower. But he would not receive any compensation. The rejection of that mission was the disappointment. He ends up accepting because there wasn't much to do. The cat arrived suddenly, catching the protagonist's attention, jumping from above into the cave, and he was happy, shouting that he had arrived. He jumped on top of the protagonist's lap, and the protagonist says he did well. Quickly, he tells the protagonist that he had sold everything and had brought a lot of coins from the tower. Also, Silver tells him that he did a good job. He said he could be lord for an hour, and Silver is laughing there in a way evil, saying it's just a matter of time until your name is known. The cat is energetic, saying it wasn't playtime, and he needs to go later to eat because he needed to earn more money. He says it was better to go and rest for a while because he had just arrived. The cat calls the rabbit, telling him stocking up on your supplies is thinking that he became addicted to making money and nothing would stop him, and that rabbit is slicing several fish for the cat to eat. Silver remembers something because he had to mark the number of days he is trapped in that cave, and he talks, which had already been there for more than 150 days. And we are also revealed that your class, farmers, are a somewhat peculiar class. Rabbit over his own shoulder, and he asked himself if he had already finished. The cat also jumping on your other shoulder, and says that we would help him too. Explained that it has been 150 days since himself ended up in that tower. What if lost 10 years ago in one day, bustling a strange and unknown giant tower appeared? She was 99 floors and appeared in the middle of a city. But it wasn't just in that city, it was in several others, and in total, they appeared without towers at the same time in different countries, including Korea. Each country investigated the tower that appeared on his lands. But he only discovered that the towers had 990 meters high and were made of an incredibly strong material and unknown that could not be pierced, nor by nuclear bombs. But then the people started to enter the tower through walls, and from that day, these people started to become famous. Reporters asked them how they had by chance entered it, and they said they were sucked in by a black hole, and when they entered, they went to a kind of first floor tower. This became world news with various presses from various countries talking about the subject all the time. Towers are connected to each other. That is, if you entered nothing, Korea first floor would be connected when the Japan or any other country. When you enter the tower, you go to the first walk, and you have to choose a path between wizard or warrior. On the second floor, from the tower starts to appear monsters unknowns never seen by humanity. And whenever they cleaned a floor, and the person who cleans the floor received different rewards, and completely unknown to the normal world has the chance to also receive a ticket. We are explained that that day who had an item, people like them, the awakened ones, could come and go freely from the tower. But people as one they could only enter with that ticket. So only the awakening of can rise in the tower. While the guy explains something, a woman opens a small chest, and comes out a lot of treasure and gold from that chest. And he reveals that appearing in the tower can bring diverse riches for that individual. The scene cuts to a market. A lady says that that was crazy, because who in sane conscience would spend 200 million flight to risk their lives in that tower, and asks the protagonist what he thought of it. He just agrees and said she was right. Our protagonist is called Park. If together after a time is going home, he explains that he was saving rent, and too many things to try to buy one ticket. And he already had a total of 12 million won. And he was cheering so the ticket doesn't increase again. He looks at the tower and wonders when he could buy that ticket. He was very discouraged, but he comes back like that. And he tells him to cheer up soon and lift your spirit, because it was needed. To save more money there. Yes, buy your ticket. He explains that bought those vegetables for a price very low. He was thinking about planting it since he could resell and go without. Increase his income. And he said he saw a girl in a commercial talking about this. He said that was your idol, favorite. And he was dreaming and going to join a good guild and buy a ticket as soon as they see your talents. And if he cleaned the tower, he would be rich and could ask him to go to marriage. The guy is crazy, oh what a trip. While they were excited, a type of portal appeared behind him. He obviously felt the noise and looked back. He sees that it was a giant portal, and it recognizes that portal. He said that disappearance, a phenomenon, sucked the first generation of awakened. And he gets excited and asks if that portal went there to get him. And he shouts that he was ready to risk his life to climb the tower to get rich, to ask for her hand in marriage. He is waiting, but nothing happens. He realizes that the portal began to close, and he becomes desperate and starts running towards him, shouting that he couldn't miss this perfect chance. He jumped, luckily managed to get through the portal, but he was in a location unknown. He didn't even know if he had entered the tower. He looks around, really realizes that he made it. But it wasn't what he expected, because what the people said was that when they entered, it was full of potions, equipment, and was everything local chic, and what he saw was a cave with rocks and a light. He is disbelieved in what has just happened because he was trapped, realizes that he was inside a cave that only had a hole at the top. On the other hand, in the tower, a creature looking into the crystal ball, that ball of crystal starts to shine. And he says that he detected the change in the tower, needed to find that cause. The scene cuts, and apparently, a girl is giving an interview about what the tower looks like inside. She says it looks like a spacious and bright place. She also says that there are several different items, and that he could also buy in the tower, and most of the time, she bought potions because it helps. Another alarm clock also speaks, which has a place called the place of training. And it is the most important place according to him, because there you train to stay strong. Otherwise, you wouldn't survive the tower. The scene cuts, and we are back in the cave, where Silver is there thinking, what could he do to get out because he was arrested? He said he rolled that cave all day, but didn't see there was no way out. There was only one, which was there above. He even reveals that he tried to ask for help by shouting, but it didn't work because there was no one nearby, and he asks if he was really lost and arrested. He starts the Joker, but soon so that he begins to see that his cell phone was ringing. He realized that it was his alarm, and he was there one day. He tries to see if there was a connection, but without no chance, just the alarm. Even though it was working, he put his cell phone away and looked at those vegetables he was holding, and he said he was very hungry. He took all the food he had bought, and he had a bottle of water, 27 tomatoes, and 10 chives, 7 pumpkins and sweet potatoes, and an apple. He thinks it was better he eats first. An apple in the morning would be better. He realizes that it was very sweet, but that was not enough because it didn't fill him. He gives a bite into the potato and sees how good it was, explaining about its texture and the crunchy sensation and a sweet taste. It takes her because she was hotter than him. He was obviously waiting, right? He was hungry. But while they were thinking about how good he chokes, he will already take that sip of water. He's thinking it was a good meal, but he needed to think. He is wondering how long would he stay there because he has to find a way to get out before let his food finish. He is lying down and despondent, thinking if he could be rescued or else he becomes a mummy. He would die right there. But he would come back and says that he wouldn't die there, because that it was the tower he always dreamed of enter. And he could not die just like that. He looks at the apple seed and decides to bury it. He would plant it. He puts it on the ground. He also takes the chives. He would use those onion leaves as food and plant the rest of it. He decided to plant 3 tomatoes and 2 sweet potatoes and use the rest he had as food, is determined to do everything to survive. And he says he would survive and wait in the meantime because they would grow while he says that they will be one his future. He feels a tremor. He asks what had happened. Could it be monsters in that place? He was thinking that the press said that there were no monsters on the first floor, and he just saw a blue moon. He didn't understand anything because it was the first time. But suddenly, he hears another Stronda. He even covers his ears because he wasn't holding on. He ends up falling to the ground and comes across a dragon flying in the sky. He notices a black dragon. He was impressed but ends up fainting. And the light that was coming from that hole in the cave ends up hitting Onion and kind of making them grow bigger quickly. The other day, the protagonist wakes with his. There, he takes his cell phone and turns it off, wondering how long he slept. And he was already scared because he had slept for 2 days. He gets up quickly, but soon it starts to give him a headache because he got up very quickly. After lying dead there on the floor, he ends up sitting behind the onion and says he was very tired, but he wasn't without energy. But he realizes that there was a tree behind him, that in case it was an onion, he gets scared because it was almost bigger than him, and before, they were just a chive. He asks how she got so big, because it was strange. There wouldn't be anything like her grow so much in 2 days. He starts thinking and coming to the conclusion that perhaps it be from the tower, right? Because it is a tower unknown that humans began even skills, so it wasn't impossible. He keeps thinking that maybe this is the same, and he already realizes that it also could have affected those apples. Look there, he was really growing. He realizes he is 52 now. He decides cutting that onion. Afterwards, it was not getting any kind of sunlight. He starts to and see that it was really difficult as he expected. Look at her size. After a while, he had ripped them all out. He only left the one root. He ends up wondering if that taste would be good, because it was huge, right? He takes a bite and soon regrets it because his tongue starts to catch fire. He realizes that it was very spicy and could not be eaten just like that out of nowhere. That is, there was affected the taste of that plant. He realizes that it wasn't but like the original. He already runs to the lake to wash his mouth, but he also realizes that it doesn't hurt your belly, just your mouth. He reveals that when he eats something spicy, his tummy hurts, but he could get used to it. He opens his bowl and starts to get some cherry tomatoes. While he ate, he looks at the sun and realizes that the sun doesn't set on the tower. But occasionally, there are moments when the sun hides behind a moon in each floor, and this blue moon phenomenon. But he says that the blue moon only happens on the 10th floor, and he thought that he was in the first one. And so, he remembers that dragon, not that dragon. They were an illusion. He is sure of that. He says that 10 years ago, when the tower, one of the biggest guilds to appear, Phoenix Guild, made the request for clean 37th floor, and information about this floor are great secrets for cause of other, but diverse guilds. Information about floor 30 can be found on YouTube, and he says that 2nd floor to the 10th have soldiers, skeletons from the 11th to the 20th had goblin, and the 20th first to the 30th had orcs, and according to rumors, spiders in 31st floor, but never mentioned anything about dragons. He never heard anything about it, and he now asks what floor he was on. Also enough, he didn't think that maybe he was in a high-ranking explored yet, and that's why he's never heard talking about dragons. Suddenly, he waters his face. He wonders why it is raining because most of the time there in the tower, it was good weather without rain. Rain is bad. He looks up and wonders if that was a monster. But after he looks properly, he realizes that it was just a rabbit. But could it be if it was a monster rabbit? He doesn't know. The rabbit suddenly jumps, and he tries to catch it, telling him to be careful. But the rabbit just falls on top of your head and lands on the ground. And he just ignores the broda. He simply goes towards that onion. Silver is surprised that even though it is a bunny, it's not that simple to jump like that height. The rabbit looks at him and makes a signal along with a little noise, and the protagonist realizes that he wanted to eat. Silver rips off a piece and gives it to him. He is very grateful to him, even cute. He sits on that rock and starts eating. Silver asks if he liked it because if he wanted more, he could eat because there were many there. And apparently, it's that rabbit thanks is the dish you are eating together with the bunny, saying it was strange because they grow very fast. And apparently, he would have to collect that plantation twice a day. Suddenly, the rabbit starts to make a noise. The rabbit looks up and starts screaming as if he were calling someone. Suddenly another rabbit arrives, jumping from above. That bunny falls to the ground and stays well. She takes off a hat and a kind of water sprinkler. I don't know where it comes from for him. It was apparently a couple of little farmers' rabbits. Silver gets surprised. And he himself says if they said a couple. And by the response and their little face, it's obvious that they were. After there was a time when that plantation was very big, and there were those little bunnies. They were taking care of the garden. One was cutting while the other was watering. They were quite happy and content, apparently singing. Silver talks that they are a beautiful couple and wonders how did it all happen. Previously, they had asked. They live in the cave together with Silver. The protagonist was surprised, as much as it was, he ends up accepting. How could the guy deny those two bunnies asking please? It was impossible, and that little guy, he already feels the pain in his heart there, almost having a heart attack, and he really ended up accepting because he didn't have much what to do. But he also says nothing it was free. They should help him cultivate that crop. And he reveals that what they should do was cut that onion. And when he was going to talk about some other things, the rabbits jump on top of him. And there, the protagonist was thinking that maybe he was being controlled. But he says they can do those basic things, that it was necessary to water and cut even the plantation. And that would help him a lot if those objects they were carrying was some item, because the watering can that the rabbit, the male, was carrying has infinite water. And he also realized that that bunny was carrying clothes that apparently had a magic pocket, because she could remove items and store infinitely can take several tools out of inside without any difficulty. And he is thinking that he had too much jealous, but he wanted some tools like that. Suddenly, rabbits catch his attention, and he realized that he had already finished the silver. Tell him to dry chives that they had cut it. He also says that he hadn't seen any changes in sweet potatoes, but that tomato cherry had sprouts bigger, and they were really growing up too fast, and he wonders if that growth had anything to do with the rabbits. The protagonist was evaluating every detail to see if it really they could stay there. But after he looked back and saw his little face, he just agreed, saying that they passed making a rude face. With a couple of bunnies, they were very happy, and later, they had managed with so many efforts. They were talking to each other, the other in some unknown language that he couldn't suddenly discover. They started running so fast that even he himself was surprised. He was asking what they were doing because they were desperate to do something very fast. The rabbits started digging some kind of hole on the floor, and Silver didn't understand what they were doing. While the male dug the ground, she was doing something of decoration. After a while, they had finished. He had made a little house, and that decoration she had been doing, it ends up putting it on the door. While he was feeling good, the male was already dying because he had tried hard a lot, and the protagonist was there in the house, thinking they were scary because they had done the house very quickly, He compliments that rabbit, saying that he was very good, and the rabbit thanks him. While that bunny was giving beauty, that bunny takes him on the shoulder him and says some words that don't work to identify. But she was a little embarrassed, and she uses language that we all understand. You understand me? I understand. We all understand. She points to the shack, but the bunny wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do that kind of thing. He's innocent, that's all, but not said. Being scared and not even refusing because he was forced, he was taken by force. While he was being taken by strength, he looked at our protagonist, asking for help. But the buy-in doesn't even stop to help the little animal. Oh man, poor thing. And the door of the house was closed, and Silver gives a bye, telling him to do his best because he was envious because, unlike the rabbit, he didn't have no one. But anyway, he is happy because they were very boring to be alone in that cave, and now he had companions. He ends up lying on that onion, and he was thanking the rabbits for being with him, because now he had company beyond him being cute too, that's it. But while he was happy, he feels a smell of smoke and came to this coast. It was very hot, and he started to feel a burnt post on the ground roll up on his back. He wonders what the fuck it was that he realizes that the sun was hitting that pet bottle and was reflecting on onion. And then he touches himself that he could try to make fire with it. Out of nowhere, he gets a strange face, saying that the tower's environment was tense, but he didn't lose his hopes because he had a fire. He had the bottle and hot chives, in which case it would be possible to light it on fire. He could use that clear bottle to start a fire like the one in the first episode of Survival in the Jungle he watched on YouTube. He starts positioning that bottle. It seems like the light hits those dried chives, but he realizes that it wasn't working. He could see that it only came out smoke, but didn't literally catch fire. He is a little disappointed, but couldn't give up. He kept trying to blow, but it didn't work. But he realizes that he has started to create a little spark. And then he tries to blow again because he would have to get it. And on the other side, the rabbit, every cycle, poor thing, the little thing was sucked up to the death. The little animal came back even depressed, but he realizes that his colleague and his friend was having difficulty with something thing, and he goes there to help, and the protagonist was there, blowing, asking for the fire to light. The rabbit says something that you can't understand, and Silver sees that he had already returned. It took a while, little more turned. Silver asks for them to blow on that leaf to see if that bunny could create fire. Starts to blow slowly, and Silver was holding that bottle to see. He lit the fire, and suddenly it worked. Silver started to catch fire, looked back, and saw that the chives, they were there. He had an idea. He was going to add chives to fry. After a while warming her up, he thought it was already good. There was only one little hot, but he took the part hot and the burnt part that gave eat well. He was going to give the first. It even looked like a pizza in the poor guy's mouth. But suddenly, he starts to shake. But it wasn't that it was bad. He said that it was very delicious, a sweet flavor that I don't even think sugar crossed your mind. This is called hunger, see bro. He says that his mouth looked like a green horse, wild man running in a wild field. Look at the ideas, bro, but apart from the joke, he says it was very delicious, and he already starts to heat up for the rabbits. Bunny also starts to heat up another, and after a while they bite, and they realize that it was really very well. Silver told them to eat more because there is enough there. Ya was Cito. He would have to get up. He first gets up and goes towards that river where there was water. And there he started to wash his face because there was a long day ahead of him. He ended up looking in a direction, wiping his face with his arm, and there he said that the spring onion harvest was complete. After a time, he had already saved the tomato and cherry. He had also completed his task of watering the sweet potato. He said it looks good, and now it's just a matter of waiting for it to grow. He's very happy, and said that there were a lot of good things happening lately. He says that after they learned, it starts to make a fire. They used those chives and placed torches throughout the cave because it is very dark at night. Besides, there are some darker places also during the day, and he says that it helped him a lot to walk around the cave, especially at night. He is with his rabbit, tying the torches to another day, and the bunny was helping him since they are cavemen, right? You understand his reference. He ends up managing to light it, and says that it's really dark around the lake. He's talking to the rabbit that putting those torches around there would help a lot. As he looks at the lake, he sees movement and thinks it's strange. Suddenly, a piranha came towards that torch, and he ends up avoiding it. But she falls to the ground, and he sees that it was a fish. He comments that he had never seen a fish there before, and it was very strange, and he is wondering why they are being attracted to that light. That could really be the torch, and he was amazed that they managed to get fish in the cave in a strange way. It works. He came to the conclusion that those fish are attracted to the strong light of the torch. After a while, he is roasting that fish. He rolled it in the chives, and his fish was ready. He catches it and thanks him for the food. He takes a bite and says that it was very good. As always, right? Even more so when he wrapped it in chives. But suddenly, he notices that the rabbits were staring at him, and they are in doubt. Rabbit eating meat? Neither do I understand this. He asks him if he really wanted to eat meat, and if they ate meat, then for the answer, I think so. And the narrator says that since he's just monsters because they lived in the tower, it didn't matter, right? He explains that a few days after, that blue moon appeared again, and with that, he discovered that this blue phenomenon happens every 30 days. The narrator explains that he was using the laptop and the portable charger. By doing this, he was able to charge his phone and get through the day. But obviously, he reaches his limit, and that's why he started to scratch the days that passed on the wall. He comes to the conclusion that it's been 61 days. On good days in the tower, he says that luckily, the rabbits go to bed at 7 p.m. But he also wakes up early. At 5 a.m., they are already up. So that is why he is not the clock, since the tower is always during the day. It would be buggy, but following the logic of their biological clocks, it wouldn't go wrong counting days, even with the fact that the sun does not set. After one day, he comments that a very good thing had happened, and there was the rabbit coming out of its hole. He opens the door, and the protagonist says good morning to him, and he probably did, and suddenly several baby bunnies came out of there. The protagonist is very happy and surprised to have seen that, but he ends up being crushed and attacked by the cute bunnies. So it was already basic, and on that day, several baby bunnies were born to that couple, and that was very good. The protagonist is very happy with that, and he was already considering the rabbit's uncle. Oh, the ideas, I envy him. He comments that he was very happy to become their uncle, making a cute face, but I think he succeeded. It was more slaves, huh? I don't know, huh? While the puppies are getting better grades and using him as a toboggan or something like that, he realizes that the two rabbits were finished, and he guesses that maybe they weren't able to sleep properly. They are going through a difficult time of parenthood, and he says he would take care of the children so they could rest and eat breakfast. The couple is even happy because they would have a little rest. After a while, Broda and the bunnies were on his lap running around the cave, and he screamed, saying that they were going to take a look at the cherry tomato flowers. After a while, he was presenting those gardens for the bunnies. The bunnies were having a lot of fun, and he himself was there, and he already realizes that the flowers began to bloom, and now they had a beautiful, flowery garden, and to bear fruit, it is necessary to pollinate, so they would do it artificially, and they would have to do it one by one. After a while, the protagonist had done several. He was very tired, his back was also hurting. He had been doing this for a whole day, so it was obvious that his back was going to hurt, and he was wanting several little bees, but slave. And he says that would be very ambitious, but it would help very much. He suddenly looks at one of the bunnies smelling one of the flowers, and that bunny comes back, and his nose seems to be bothered. He ends up sneezing and falling back, and the protagonist doesn't let it go. Obviously, he starts laughing with him. Then he takes it with one hand and says he should have been more careful. While he talks to the rabbit, he notices something. There was fruit growing, and he was already happy, getting up and throwing him up, even singing a little song. and he was very happy that he had achieved it. After so much time and so much work, they finally managed to get some fruit. And he also comments that that was the day before the blue moon, and that the blue moon would begin soon. He apparently is putting out that fire that was on the floor, using water from the pet bottle, and then puts several stones around one of the leaves and lights a fire, covering it with one last stone. And he says that now everything was ready. He thought that was enough to camouflage himself and keep warm. And in the meantime, Mother Rabbit was putting the bunnies inside, and the protagonist comments that it was almost time. It would start after a while. The rabbit was already going into his hole, and the protagonist said he would see him later if they survived. The blue moon is just a slice of the cake. I didn't understand, but after a while, it was already dark, and the protagonist was trying to sleep, which seemed to be half finished. He is wondering when it would finish because it was very tiring. He says he kept all the things that smelled or had a smell and was left in the corner, waiting for the moon to end, and he was there for a long time. He doesn't know how many hours had already passed, and every second felt like hours. He was hoping it would end soon. He said that crying was far away, but his body keeps shaking. But he notices something, a tremor, and he wonders what that sound was. Outside, there was a giant bear. Every paw when it hit the ground made a bang. It was at least twice as big as a tree. And he ends up finding that hole, and he becomes very curious about what could be there, and the protagonist already knows it would go to shit. He gets a little desperate, and he's hoping the bear didn't see him. He ends up catching his backpack, hoping the bear didn't see him. He tries to be as careful and slow as possible so as not to make any noise to get that bear's attention. But suddenly, his bag opens, and all his items fall to the ground, making noise. He is looking at things, disbelieving what happened. He is very scared of what could happen now. He looks up and sees the bear is looking. Their front or protagonist starts to scream, and the bear also. After a while, there are several rabbits trying to wake up the protagonist, pulling his lip, everything, and nothing wakes him up. He looks like a stone, and he ends up talking, "Mom, more one." He was dreaming. But he didn't wake up at all until our bunny slapped him in the face. Wakes up scared, and the poor rabbit is flying, "Hey bro." He was also wondering what had happened in a blue moon. He looks up and sees it was over. I think he was so scared of that use that he ended up fainting, And he was thinking that he survived, so right. But he's saying that his whole body hurts. And he knows what happened to you because he's sure he saw a giant monster. And he remembers the scene with the bear looking at him and screaming right after. And he remembers that he put his hands on his head, screaming because of the floor trembling, and he only remembers that. He says he was almost killed by a monster. He was very scared. But while he was scared shitless there, the rabbits were playing on top of him. Mother Rabbit was seeing from afar that the protagonist was very scared. Yet he was very shaken, and she has an idea. She is going to do something for him. While the protagonist is in front of the fire, it's warming up with the rabbits, everything around it. Mother Rabbit offers him a fish. He thanks her very much, and he starts to eat that fish and says it was very good. The protagonist is saying that that monster that had appeared had found that place, and he didn't know if he felt the presence of the other monsters, so he simply gave up on the hole being just a cave. But he is sure there is no guarantee that this will happen again in the future, and that's why he had to do something because he was very lucky this time. He really could have died, and he says he would have to work harder to survive, and for now, all he could do is eat, right? He says that as he starts to bite that fish and rip it apart. But suddenly, he looks back with that rabbit calling him, and he realizes there was a blue tomato. He wonders how that tomato turned out like that. And he also says that the size was the size of a golf ball, so it was very big. He gets closer and takes it in his hand. He says that it was very beautiful, but he really doesn't know why it turned purple. He ends up pulling it off the tree and wonders if it was already ripe. But as soon as he pulls it off, it looks like a window in front of him. The window says that he was successful in completing the mission to collect a fruit that has energy from the moon. That is, it explains why it is purple. He is impressed, and the message window appears in front of him. And she furthermore says that his achievement caught the attention of the tower manager. But our protagonist doesn't know what exactly that means. Two other messages appear, saying that the tower manager was keeping an eye on him, and also says that the tower manager wasn't happy at all. The protagonist has no idea why he isn't happy. He says this, looking to the window, but our bunny doesn't understand anything either. Another message says that the tower manager discovered that the protagonist did not receive the invitation to be in the tower, and the message also says that the tower manager wants to hide his mistake. The protagonist is surprised, wondering if it was a mistake, and he is actually in that tower, because it would be too much coincidence or luck, right? He's there. The protagonist is already pissed, holding the window notification saying that he lived there for 61 days, and is just now saying that it was a mistake. He is there, and he shouts that he really wanted to go home. The window appears again, changing the message saying that the manager is in doubt if he made our protagonist drag up to hide his evidence. The protagonist becomes even more upset because he had just unlocked an achievement. Instead of being rewarded, the tower manager was thinking about putting him to sleep forever, and he says that was ridiculous. But the message from that window doesn't just change. 3 dots appear, and the protagonist is saying that it was very rude. And suddenly the window changes to another message, and it says that the tower manager was waking up. Out of nowhere, an aura begins to appear around the protagonist, and the protagonist is impressed, wondering if he really was awakened. And he says that if he was awakened, then it means he is officially an awakened from the tower. But he still doesn't know his class, and so he wanted to see. He was anxious, thinking if he could be a swordsman, or is he even skinny? And he is waiting because the system message says that the manager was choosing his class, and he was very anxious. And he says that his class is a farmer, literally appears once, rancher class of rank F. He himself is standing still. He is knocked out, and is not understanding anything about why he is a farmer now. 3 notification windows appear in front of the protagonist. One of them says that he was supposed to do his job and not get sick. Another says that he would be closer to nature to do his thing by doing his work. And the other says that he would gain experience points when he does crops. The protagonist is already desperate. He is begging you not to do this to him because it was a joke, him becoming a farmer, a class that had never appeared in the world. He shouts for the status window to appear. The window ends up appearing, and he was actually there, saying that he was a farmer in the tower, and he was seeing the status window for the first time, but not in a good way. It was in a bad way because, besides him being a farmer, talent showed that he was ordinary. He even imagines himself on a type of program like The Night in Brazil. He is creating a scene in his head. He imagines in his head the presenter saying that they had a special guest. The presenter says that the tower himself, despite having only an ordinary talent, and he asks for a round of applause for our gentleman. And our gentleman steps forward without the protagonist's name, and he asks what class our protagonist was, and the protagonist imagines himself talking, and I'm a farmer from the tower. But coming back to reality, he doesn't accept this. Seriously, no tower farmer bro. He doesn't want to believe it. He doesn't want that. He gets furious and throws that cherry tomato on the ground, because he didn't need that. But he realizes that the rabbits were a little scared of him today. He was out of control, and looking at that scene, he immediately stops what he was doing. He looks at them again, looks at the garden, and gets a little sad. After a while, he looks at all his effort, that even the rabbits helped the hut, everything they had built there, and he realizes that he really worked hard for it, and it wasn't worth destroying it just because of that. And he says that there he would continue cultivating, and the rabbits immediately become happy as he looked at it. The blue, half-purple something appears in it. It ends up looking like a status window, and their status was until it was time, and she did the following. That status window said that her taste was better than normal since it was special, and when it is consumed, it permanently increases 0.5 MP, shows the cultivator that in this case is our protagonist, and the validity is 30 days with your ranking. The protagonist remains astonished at that tomato being an item, and not just food. And he says that it is small, but it increases his status, and he is really amazed. And he says that was unbelievable because he needed to praise himself, and the rabbits too, right? He cultivated something so good like that. On the other hand, there is a dragon watching that whole scene, and the dragon ends up getting angry for some reason. The scene goes back to the protagonist, and he is saying that it was thanks to them that he got there, and he starts dancing with the rabbits, playing and jumping. But suddenly another window appears in front of him, and he really wants to know what it would be, and the window said that a mission had been triggered, and the mission was for him to offer the fruit containing the energy of the blue moon to the tower manager, and the reward would be a class skill, but if he refused, it would only be death. And he is saying that another mission had appeared, and he has doubts about why he would die just because of that. He even thinks it was a joke because it wasn't possible. But answering our friend, is it really possible for us? He himself is impressed that he won a mission, but he accuses the system that it was blackmail because it couldn't be a normal mission, and he was fighting, asking the worthless dog's administrator what life is for him, because it would be stupid for him to die just because he refused the mission. He keeps thinking about it. He realizes that it's not worth dying because of a fruit. He ends up saying that he could stay, and it was. To spare his life, the fruit disappears from his hand, and the system says that he had completed the mission, and he could open his reward. And it is now anxious because he realizes now that he had received a reward. And he remembers that he had mentioned a skill related to the class, and he had been so focused on his death penalty that he forgot about the reward, saying the administrator was very generous. He clicked on the open button, expecting something to come, and he obtained a skill called sowing was level 1, and it slightly increased the chance of germination occurring when a seed is planted. The protagonist looks sad because that skill wasn't something good, and then he realizes he wanted to forget that his class was a farmer, so there would always be some skill from the like. After a while, the protagonist was on the banks of that river in that lagoon, but right. And what he was doing there was simply fishing his way. But he was using those torches to attract the piranhas, and when they ended up leaving, he would hit her with a stick. He does exactly that. A piranha jumped towards him, and he already gets in shot at her. She ends up falling to the ground, already asleep. Besides, he's getting XP. He was still getting food. Look, it's a combo in 2, he says. He had already gotten 5, and he had already got 10 experience points. He explains that after he awakened, he began to get experience points, which he couldn't do before. And he says that after fishing several piranhas a day, somehow he got to level 2. It takes a little longer, and then he was going to carry these sluts. But he says that he even wanted more. But it's not a good idea to kill living beings for no reason. And he also says that they are good supplies of protein, so he couldn't kill them all. After a while, he's calling people to eat. He had already roasted the piranhas, and when he said this, the bunnies were already running to him in desperation. The protagonist tells them to eat calmly because they had grown a lot, and they were like a sorcerer. It was more hungry as piranhas when meat enters the river. He says they needed to leave some for their father, and the protagonist ends up giving 2 big fish to that couple. And he says that he got information about the rabbits, because now how he is awakened appears on top of his head, and what it said there is that he was a white rabbit farmer, and that was their identity as a type of a monster he had never heard of. Maybe it's because he's on an unknown floor. And he says that if, based on their name, he believes his species has specialized in cultivation rather than fights. Obviously, he thinks that's why no one knows them because they are more on board with him. And he doesn't even know what happened. But he's guessing they lost their farm since they were looking for somewhere and ended up asking to stay there. So they must have migrated somehow and stopped there in that cave. And he himself asked if he had somewhere to return to. After a while, the protagonist says that it would be great if they could understand each other, because all they do is that little piu o peer noise. I don't know, but the protagonist says leave it aside. They would have to start the work because that day was an important day, And the bunny says that after a while, the protagonist sees the tomato fruits they're growing up. And he sees that it was beautiful. It was very perfect, and they are all impressed, even the puppies. He says that the time has finally come to harvest those fruits. They gave them a lot of work, and they finally would be rewarded. And he says it was time to harvest. He goes to get one, and he's already shaking with emotion. Everyone is tense, staring at the protagonist. The protagonist takes one, and he's very happy, and he doesn't all protocol that this is his first cherry tomato, and he says he didn't even have to try hard. But suddenly, the protagonist appears in the window is in doubt. Jana says that he got a good magic cherry tomato, and his class experience points increased slightly. He just gained 10 experience points just for harvesting the tomato. It's a type of conquest. Apparently, he just knew the name of that tomato. Here in this case, it is magic cherry tomato. And he realizes that it is not the same as the blue one. He ends up being able to see the status of that item. And he saw your status, which in this case decreases 10 grams every time you eat it. In addition to some other attributes that, in this case, increases mana very low, but lasts 10 minutes. Anyway, it realizes that it's 10 minutes, but eating 10 at the same time increases mana reaching a point. He wonders if the other tomatoes also have the same status. He ends up turning you several cherry tomatoes from there, but when he takes one out, he realizes he got the wrong one because he had taken a cherry tomato cherry Majuro. And the system says that your experience points have not increased, and then it only gives 7 points for him. He has to hit the right tomatoes because that way, he gets extra points in addition to the 10 points of experience. And he says he gained less experience points because of that and didn't achieve anything in his class. And he realizes that he needed to collect a certain item, because the one he had picked up was not an item. It was just a common cherry tomato. He says it's a bit difficult because he thought it would be easier since he has to hit the exact spot to pick up the tomato. After a while, he had already harvested several. He was using that leaf to hold the tomatoes if it was a bag, and the system warns you that it was missing. It's incredible, earning a lot of bonus points, and he also says that he managed to reach level 4. This is incredibly fast, and he says that he thinks that those cherry tomatoes were enough, and he goes to try one. But the bunnies start pawing the floor. They are angry. He apologizes and says that since they did everything together, they should eat together. He asks please, so they don't get angry because Father Rabbit was very angry. And he said that they would have to celebrate the harvest successful with the cherry tomatoes. The bunnies were very eager to try it, and the protagonist told them to fill it. Everyone starts eating the tripe at the same time, and the protagonist realizes that it was very good. After a while, he starts to eat, imagining lying in a large garden, and there in the sky, several fireworks are coming in a shooting star. It starts like it's New Year. He says summer, I don't know. It must be some culture. From there, he starts crying. Eating that cherry tomato, and the rabbits don't understand. It's nothing, he's pointing out the more talk. This guy is crazy, let's get out of here soon, woman. After a while, they were taking the balls from Cherry for those firestones. Everyone is even taking the puppies, helping them. After they get there, put some straw on top. The puppies came bringing the straws, and they placed them on top, and the buy-in from the protagonist and enslaving the animals while lying down. He comments that this would be his uncle. He has grown up enough to help their parents with the tasks, saying that they are really children of farmer rabbits. And the tramp he is lying down, right? The protagonist says he fell asleep, so he would go out, and tomorrow would be a great day. The guy had even made a bed with a blanket, pillow, and even an eye patch there to keep it dark, look, and before going to sleep, he says that he did well. After a time, he is already sleeping, and when he is sleeping, a mission appears, saying that he was supposed to offer magic tomatoes for the tower administrator, and the reward would be a skill related to his class, and that of that mission would be death. But as he was sleeping, he doesn't care because he hadn't even seen it. He turns to the side and stays a little bit like that. But suddenly, the system makes a very loud noise that wakes you up, scaring the protagonist. He says he would give it to the administrator. He takes a bunch of tomatoes and ends up donating them. The system says that he had completed the mission, and the tower administrator was satisfied, and he could open this reward. The protagonist was already fed up with being forced to do these things every time, and was at least asking him to receive something useful. He ends up opening it and receives a skill called Harvest Level 1, and that ability allowed harvesting fruits a little before or after the ideal moment, but they are treated as if had been harvested at exactly the same time. The protagonist makes a face, and he asks why he would need a harvesting skill. After a while, he says he had thought about that, but that ability was more useful than he expected because he wasn't rereading as much as before. And because of this, he got several experience points because his chance of error was much smaller. And he says that now he doesn't need to wait until the perfect day because that made things easier and sped up a lot. He says they would shrink a little just over tomatoes. Another window appears, telling him to offer 200 magic tomatoes and cherry to the administrator of the tower. But unlike other times, there was no reward. And the protagonist says he was already taking time. And he says that there was no reward this time. He is indignant, saying that that administrator was just a thief. The protagonist takes that cherry they had picked and offers it to the administrator. He says that since one of his last missions helped him, he could keep those, and the guy with him is desperate because they were working for a long time there for them to lose, just like that. After a while, that thing appears again. Mission only now it was 250 cherry tomatoes and had no reward. And the protagonist is already pissed because it had appeared again. And here that administrator he was getting greedy. He wonders why the number of tomatoes and cherry doesn't stop growing. Because, after a while, it was already 300. But after a while, the protagonist said that he would no longer use them. The administrator was already asking for 500 cherry tomatoes without giving any reward. And he says that definitely he wouldn't help, and he was refusing, and the system journey says that the administrator of the tower was surprised. And the protagonist says that that day, he rebelled against the tower administrator for the first time. The protagonist gets pissed because he would have to do it again, and he says he wouldn't do that anyway. There was no chance, and he tells the administrator that they needed to eat some of them to stay alive, and what he was asking for was too much. Another window of status appears and says that the tower manager said it was the tower farmer's problem, so it was for him to stop protesting and give him those tomatoes he had asked for, to give him a smile and ask if it was his problem. But he says that it was harder and suffered days to collect that. The system's journey says that the tower manager said that the protagonist just be mine to seed, and he asks the boss to exaggerate what he said, because it wasn't a big deal. The protagonist, he keeps asking even more if it really wasn't a big deal, and the protagonist is already pissed, with his veins popping out of his face. He says he wouldn't help him or give him any status. The window says that the tower manager was confused, so I could test it by just ignoring that window. After a while, he was pulling out that chive with the rabbits, while the status window is on his tail. And what it said was that the manager was asking him if he was really going to turn down that quest. After a while, the protagonist was roasting those fish. The bunnies were preparing those tomatoes. And even so, the status window said that the tower manager said that the protagonist could die if he refused that quest. The protagonist was already fed up. He spoke to the window, saying he didn't want to give the crops to someone who said that everything he did was just to sow the seeds. Two windows appear, saying that the tower manager said that it is not the tower's work, and that the farmer should do that. He also said that he is the manager, so he should obey his orders. The protagonist says that's why he wasn't giving him the tomatoes. The protagonist was murmuring that he did it with force, forcing him to give those crops, and he didn't appreciate his efforts, saying that the manager just exploited him. He asked himself if he was the manager of the tower. If he was a bad employer. After that sentence, the tower manager was in shock. He got punched in the face. Apparently, the tower manager was very nervous, and he says he was sorry, apologizing. The protagonist makes a face, eating those cherry tomatoes, and that makes the tower manager angry. The system says that the tower manager was very angry because the protagonist ate the cherry tomatoes, and he said he would kill him now if he didn't obey that quest. The protagonist offers 5 and says he would give the next ones later. The protagonist looks at the bunnies who were fighting over a cherry tomato and told the tower manager that he needed to feed the children too. The manager ends up accepting those tomatoes, and they disappear from the protagonist's hand. The system window appears again and says that the tower manager conceded the agreement just this once, and the protagonist is obliged. The status window ends up disappearing, and the protagonist says that the tower manager was simpler than he thought. After a while, 91 days had already passed since the protagonist was lost, and the 4th blue moon would begin. He was with a bit of fear, was covered, and looking up, and the only thing he had there to snack on was a tomato. He was eating while he was eating. He said he heard that people with high MP could handle the noise of monsters up to a certain level, and that's why he was eating that. But it would be better if what happens at that time happened again. He's talking about that dragon noise, apparently, and he was hoping for time to pass quickly. But suddenly, one of the leaves begins to shine. The protagonist looks and sees that it was the moonlight. He is impressed by what he had just seen. He looks, and one of the tomatoes that was green starts to turn purple, just out of nowhere, a blue-purple, and he was anxious. He would have to get out of his little hiding place. He says he couldn't wait to welcome him. He would have to go at that moment, and the leaves of sweet potato end up shining together, and he already realizes that maybe it would be blue like that too. He couldn't believe it. He really needed to check it out. He was with a little scared, but ends up running towards it, and simply starts digging the ground to see the sweet potato. After a while, he had dug a big hole, looking for which one of them turned blue. The sweet potato imbued with the energy of the blue moon. It was a bit purple, looking like beetroot, but it was incredible. And the system warned him that he had harvested a sweet potato with blue moon energy, and the protagonist's experience point increased, making his level 1 harvesting proficiency also increase several other points, in addition to the 50 experience points he got, and he realizes he still had a tomato. He ends up picking that blue tomato, and the protagonist starts, and he says it's like he has 2 worlds in his arms. But the system suddenly appears, saying that he had an ambition to add to it. And he says that he knew it would appear, but it was obvious, and there were 2 missions there, and obviously the land manager was asking for both. It wasn't just one. He had noticed that 2 new missions had appeared at the same time, and he says that the manager was really strong and could kill him at any moment. The protagonist says he would first finish the last mission he had done, giving cherry tomatoes to the manager, and the manager is satisfied with that Friday, but he thought he got away with it. But he didn't, not again. The system window appears, and the manager was nervous, mumbling and asking what the protagonist was doing because he was trying to get out and run away. And he regrets having said that the tower manager was simple. In this case, he was simple to control. The tower manager asks for that sweet potato. He has the sweet potato and the tomato in his hand. He is unsure what he should do, and he ends up simply eating the tomato and enjoying it a lot. And that tomato he had eaten, he says that it was sweet, saying that he could feel a festival in his mouth. But did the administrator like it? After the protagonist ate that cherry, the next day he was already roasting that sweet potato. He said it was a shame he didn't have aluminum foil, and he was excited to see what that sweet potato tasted like. The next day, the door opens, and the rabbits come out. They were very curious to see what the plate was getting ready. Telling them that they had arrived at the exact moment, he was presenting the potato to the rabbits. Sweet with the energy of the blue moon, they are impressed, and their mouths water. And I told them that it wasn't much, but they would eat together. But the rabbit father appears in front of everyone. He tells everyone to wait his way. Of course, because it's not possible to understand what he says right. Silver asks what was wrong, and he points to the protagonist, and I think he told him to eat alone. You want me to eat alone because there's little, Ah, I understand. Silver gets emotional about what he just said, and he puts his hand on your head and says he was the only one who cared, and he was happy for that. And I, Sprout, smiling with a tear in my eyes, was thinking that little did he know that the blue moon cherry tomato had already gone to the pot. He had already eaten the dish. He starts to peel that potato and says he would eat it. When he takes a bite, he realizes it wasn't that good, so he finishes spitting because it was very hot. The pieces of potato ended up falling on the floor, and the rabbits watched, and everyone picked up their pieces quickly, except the father rabbit. He realizes that all his children had already taken everything, but when they start to eat, it was very hot too. They can't, and end up spitting everything out. And Prada doesn't understand anything with that noise, and the rabbits crying, and Silver ate something very hot that I couldn't eat. Right, and Silver caught everyone's attention. He said that from that moment on, they would start planting the sweet potato broods and the bunnies. It wasn't even seeming attention. He was eating, and the Silver said that was what they were eating just now. And I say that's why they're prohibited from eating raw sweet potatoes, and rabbits get desperate. They start to cry while one cried, the other got angry, and climbed onto Broda. But Silver said there was no point in complaining, because he wasn't going to let him. And Silver was thinking that if he continued like that, there wouldn't be anything left since they eat that all day. Silver said they would be eating very good sweet potatoes, not dinner. And if they help with the gross ones, he was going to give them a special snack, and asked what they thought of this idea. And he himself was thinking that he decided to expand the plantation areas of sweet potatoes, and he said, "Special snacks," with an evil face, while the bunnies were happy because the idea helped the bunnies with forced labor and encouraged them to start working. And they were actually doing it. That's it, and Silver tells Mother Rabbit to try to leave models standing because he could get some seeds to bloom the onion. And Silver realizes that the more he plants, the greater the chance of becoming an item. And the bunnies were working hard. One started digging quickly, and the other started to place the sprouts. And Father Rabbit just started watering them with water. And the bunny, whilst holding a sprout, got hungry and ended up biting it. But now he takes a beating from his father, and he slaps him on the ass to stop him. Poor bunny. Bunny. And the plate was collecting some tomatoes cherry. The system starts several notifications. He was increasing in level and gaining XP clearly. And I stopped until I realized that he had already reached a level 8. So his class had improved a lot. He was thinking that at this rate, he could just keep planting, but he would make a snack. He starts to make a type of skewer using cherry tomatoes, and the system warns him that the tower administrator was spying on him. And when he looks at the window, disappears. But obviously, he had seen it. He was thinking that there were people spying on him. He starts calling the bunnies to eat, and they started running desperately to eat the silver. He said it was special cherry tomato skewers. They were eager to try it, and they started eating. And I told them to be careful because they had to blow on it before eating because it was hot. And the silver one told them that they had already planted a lot of potato sprouts. He asks if they didn't want to dig more. After a while, he was digging, and he wanted to see how they were doing. When he pulled out, there were already several. The system warned him that that sweet potato was strong. That is, it was better than a normal one. He realized he had gotten 15 sweet potatoes. He got 5 for each root, and he was saying it was very good for the first harvest. He notices that there was a sweet potato sprout on the ground. He digs it and starts planting, and he said it would be a waste not to plant him. And the life system, he had gained a level 1 seeding effect already, that he had planted sweet potato sprouts. And Prada was surprised that that counted as sowing, and he realized that he would also have to plant to increase his level. That is, ha ha ha, you won't be able to enslave the bunnies, my friend. Protagonist draws the attention of all the bunnies and tells them to wait. He asked them to let him do that, and in the background, the dragon from the tower was watching everything. He ate those cherry tomato breasts. He heated them up, and then ate more and said they were bitter. but the dragon was eating, asking why it had gone wrong. He said that protagonist had seemed like he was enjoying it, and he decided to spy on himself again. He realized that the pro was happy and eating sweet potatoes. That dragon doesn't like it at all and says that it was impossible. He gets nervous because they were eating sweet potato without him, and he reveals his name. His name was the big black dragon Brittany, and while he was happy on his knees eating, the system warns him that an additional quest had been started. The additional quest was to offer the strong roasted sweet potato to the tower administrator. He would get no reward other than if he refused, he would die. That's it. And the protagonist doesn't say anything because he didn't have much to do. And he turns around and says it was another time. But the system says again that the administrator of the tower insists on a sweet potato. And the system said that the administrator wouldn't leave him alone if he didn't deliver one. Or Silver said to him he only had one and asked if there was anything as a reward. Then the mission started giving a reward. Now it would be a skill related to his class. And Silver says that if it was another skill, that would be fine. He said he could get the sweet potato, and the system notifies him that the mission had been completed, and he ends up opening the reward. He had reached the level 1 seed store, and the system said that when the skill is activated, a product can be purchased at the seed store every 30 days. And Prada gets excited, of course, because he could get several seeds, and he asked if he could buy them there inside the tower. That was incredible for him. He ends up trying to activate the store skill of seeds, and the system warns that it was checking the customer's purchase history. The park identified the name of protagonist, and then the system realizes that he didn't have any history, and he was unsure of how he could buy it because he didn't have any money. And he asked if they could do some type of exchange. The system congratulates protagonist on being the seed store's first new customer, and the system said it would provide a coin. Shortly after, a coin had been deposited into protagonist's seed bank account, and he himself realizes in another window that appears that he had a coin. And the protagonist was thinking that she was very generous for having given him a coin, and obviously by logic, that coin was for exchange. He clicks on Open the Seed Store and was already thinking about what he would buy. The system tells him that dealing with a novice client, only 3 types of randomly chosen seeds would appear, and 3 appear: the seed of cabbage, carrots, and red peppers. And the process was thinking that, as the name suggests, it only sells seeds. It was thinking that they cost 0.1 coins, so he was guessing it would be 100,000. 1 every 1,000 seeds, and he realized that it was very expensive. And the pros were thinking that red peppers and cabbage are very insects since he couldn't manage to fill them there. It fills a food, it's a Korean dish, right? And he said it here, so there were carrots left. When he says carrots, the rabbits go crazy, and Silver asks what had happened since they were looking at him. And he already touches himself and asks if they liked carrots. And obviously, they are enchanted, Father Rabbit and Mother too, and Silver starts spelling carrots. Bro, the guy is very bewildered. The guy keeps repeating carrots and rabbits too. But when he was about to say carrots again, Father Rabbit gets angry and kicks him. The system tells him that protagonist had bought 1,000 carrot seeds, and he lost 0.1 coins. No, right, he bought it, so it was deducted from his account, and a bag ends up appearing, actually a small bag, right? And the silver one said that it seemed like it was more expensive than the seeds themselves. And now protagonist would need to wait 30 days to buy other things again. And the system says that the administrator was satisfied with his purchase. But protagonist doesn't even like it a little and asked why he was happy with that. And after a day had passed in the tower, they were ready to start planting carrots. And the project was thinking that it got carrot seeds for the first time by changing the item store. But there was a little bee watching from afar. He, after a while, if she comes to the boys to play, he had already planted several carrot seeds since they were so happy. And Father Rabbit looks to Mother Rabbit, and they seemed to be very happy. And he was saying that since it had been a few days since planting the carrots, he said that even though the seeds hadn't sprouted, they had been acting that way since the day of planting. and he was wondering if they really liked them that much. Carrots. But he said he was going to take a nap. He was going to polish the flowers and cut onions in the afternoon. He was almost asleep until a bee passed by for him, and she was making so much noise that even the bunny covered his ears. But Silver got irritated after a while, and he wondered why, because insects were starting to appear there. He realized it was just a bee. He looked right, and it really was a different bee. But it was, and he wondered why there was a bee there, right? He was enchanted by its beauty, who even dropped the bunny. Poor guy, he was unsure if that was a monster in the shape of an insect. He was already choosing the name of the bee. My God, heaven is your name. What will be? The bee is poisonous. He is already in shock to see that it was a poisonous bee. He starts to warn everyone that it was dangerous. And obviously, Mommy Rabbit, the little rabbit, starts to run. They end up just leaving, ready to go back, and Silver gets angry and says that they were shameless rabbits. He was sad, pissed off because they had abandoned him like that. And to improve, the dry administrator says that poisonous bees are carnivorous beings that hunt monster animals with their poisonous stings, and then they eat her meat. It helped a lot, brother? Silver is scared shitless and starts trying to avoid her. He told her not to try. When he got closer, he said it was very bad. It wasn't even tasty at all, besides just the bone. But the bee was furious. He grabbed something and threw it forward, telling her to eat that. And what he had placed in front of her was a flower that she was enchanted with, and began to land on that flower. He saw that she was very happy, and I asked myself if the administrator said she was a carnivore, and he didn't say anything. He just kept to himself, and Silver realizes that it was a great chance. He catches the attention of the little bee here. Look at him. And he said that if she was hungry, she could eat the other flowers. And I needed to be anxious because she would pollinize him. He tells her to jump in and devour all the flowers, and he was saying that at this rate, he wouldn't need to continue pollinating the cherry tomatoes. The rabbits start to reappear, and the dish was a little upset and asks them how they have the courage to come back after being ignored and abandoned. I don't want to know, I don't want to know. After a while, that bee approaches Prada again, and he asked if she had finished yet. But when she got closer to him, he got scared, and he ended up falling on the rock. But she didn't want to sting him. She put on top of him, he gets ready, and goes for a nap, right? Protagonist was still afraid of her biting him. That's why he left her alone. Look at the ideas, bro. Yesterday, after Prada, he was explaining that 120 days had already passed since the day he got lost. He got lost in quotation marks, right? It was in danger. He was with the rabbits, taking care of the plantation. But he ends up getting angry because the bunnies were messing around him, and he ends up scolding them. Of course, he told them to go play somewhere else, and he looked from afar and noticed that they were playing a lot, and according to him, it was good to enjoy the youth. And the little bee ends up landing on his shoulder. And apparently, they were very happy together. There he asks if she had finished working yet, suck all the nectar from that day. And then the dish explains that it had been several weeks, so his connection with the little bee had already gotten stronger. He explains that she worked in the morning, sucked the nectar, and went back to the forest, to the cave in the afternoon. And after a while, she had already arrived at lunchtime. He shouts at everyone to go eat, and the dish was in doubt. Maybe she hasn't been returning to her group for a long time. He didn't even know if she had a group. In fact, he was saying that a few days ago, she started releasing that smell like that, and the system warns her that that was onion with honey. The Silver started to eat, and it was very good. It was delicious, and the bunnies weren't left out, obviously. They ate, they savored too. And I practiced remembering the old memories. He talked about that at first. He had gone into panic as he saw that it was poisonous. But he said that thanks to her, he was able to quickly expand his field to obtain honey. And he spoke with enthusiasm that in a few months, he would obtain so much honey that the bears would be jealous. And the system warns that the administrator was happy for him. What does the project suspect? He looks to the side, and the message disappears, and he leaves it aside. He says that stopping to think, he thinks there are only a few days left until the blue moon, and he is thinking that that was a problem, and he hopes nothing happens this time. He starts saving enough food, and he saw that the little bee had stopped going there. Then soon, she should also be getting ready for the blue moon. And the bunnies were very nervous, and obviously, the silver one notices this. He was more nervous than normal, and I told them that it was almost time. He told them to go home. He realized that they were hugging another one, but protagonist doesn't understand any nonsense. He keeps looking and asks if they were listening, but out of nowhere, Mommy Rabbit and Daddy Rabbit start running very fast. They enter the den, and the silver one doesn't understand why they would be abandoning the babies. Daddy Rabbit says goodbye with a smile on his face and closes the door quickly. Protagonist is in shock. Of course, he wasn't understanding the situation. He didn't know what was happening because they left them out, and he said that the blue moon was about to start. And when he said it had already started, he was in shock, looked back scared because he hadn't prepared himself, and those rabbits that were there start to transform into a giant monster. And obviously, he himself gets scared shitless that he wouldn't stay, and he wonders what the hell was going on there. The dish, even I didn't understand anything, the rabbits. They were all excited, my god, the guy didn't understand anything. But when he least expects it, a strong light appears, and the rabbits begin to slowly return to normal, but they were different. They were white besides a little black one there, and they were apparently adults. And he calls him. Of course, he realizes that they had turned into adult rabbits until the color had changed, as I mentioned. And the protector realized that it was the blue farm since they were born. And he was asking if it was like it was a rite of passage. And Silver was relieved and almost crying because he thought something wrong had happened to him. And a little black bunny that was there, he ends up touching Trota's arm as if he were consoling him. But then, protagonist starts to grab him to kiss, and everyone else runs like it's a horror movie. Come here, man. I'll take it off after the blue moon. If the rabbits pass, mother and father ended up opening the door, and they realized that protagonist was already there. He had built a fire and was with the rabbits. They started to hug each other and to satisfy the longing, and Silver said he was going to prepare a feast to celebrate. A little bunny raises his hand and ends up simply appearing a shovel, and Silver is surprised by that. Of course, each of them managed to summon some object. One of them got a white rabbit scythe, the other got a wheelbarrow, the other loader, and what we mentioned previously, what to get. Shovel and Silver realized that they could summon items just like their parents, and Silver came to the conclusion that when they became adults, they get their own items, and they were thinking they couldn't borrow them. But they realized they only had one that didn't have anything. And when he asks what he could do, he ends up taking out a wooden hammer. I don't know, and Silver realizes that it doesn't seem to be the slightest bit a farm tool. And after protagonist pays attention to his name, he realizes that it was a black warrior rabbit. And after a while, the bunny was already getting their hands dirty, just like they did before. But now they've managed to help even more. Even Mommy Rabbit is surprised by his puppy. They were going very fast while one was digging. The other was already harvesting the tomatoes with his wheelbarrow. And the Silver for him to put in that wow, how cute. And the Silver one noticed that they were starting to help their parents on the farm. And he remembered that those little babies who used to running around there, now they were so big. According to Silver, it made me want to cry, man. I think he's helping protagonist right. Because he quickly realizes that the warrior rabbit wasn't doing anything. He looks at him, and he was fine, eating in his own way, and obviously the dish didn't want that. He wanted him to do something, and Silver asks that since he was a warrior, his job was to fight. But they were in a cave that had no way monsters appear, even more that would harm the farm, so there is nothing left to fight. That's right, and Silver said that the hammer couldn't be used for the farm, and Silver didn't know what they could do. But the rabbit gets excited and points to the water. And Silver realizes it was really true. He could get married in that lake. Hunting is also a type of fight, right? It's more or less. Silver said he was going to betray them. and he was just going to put the bridge in. And he told him to show his great warrior power. And he started to swing that torch from side to side until the piranha jumps and goes towards him. And protagonist shouted to go at that moment. And at that moment, the rabbit ends jumping and already slapping the pyramid. But I think it was very strong until Silver realized that it was just the bone in the wall, and the rabbit thinking that he did well, even giving it beauty. And protagonist realized that that fish had died at the same time when he showed it to the others. It only had bones, my friend. They don't say anything. It's just not that tense atmosphere. And I can tell you that I would get better at it if he kept practicing. So there was no need to stay upset. And they just had to eat. And little by little, the rabbits managed to get used to their functions, even better, improving her and Silver. She was already telling the rabbit to see because he had already gotten good at it. And on day 125, the Silver said that the store said seeds opened again. And obviously, he wanted to see what was there. He was very anxious and wondered what he was going to buy that time. The system window says that with his level, he could only buy one of them. Probably in the future, he would be able to buy more. And that time, there was watermelon, pumpkin, and corn. And he realized that the prices of those seeds were completely different from last time. And he only had 0.9 coins left. He would only be able to buy corn seed, and he was very doubtful about what he could do. Because if they continued to get more expensive, they wouldn't be able to buy new ones next time. He didn't even know how to get those coins. The dish explains that there is a reward for finishing one walking despite being a good amount. He could only get one reward for walking, and because of this, the profit margin of hunters is not that high. So I said that the second method was by hunting monsters. They could sell monster parts to merchants, or in the first one's store. Walking, and he said that this was the hunter's way of profiting since they can continue making profits. And that one method was completing missions to get that's all the rewards. And protagonist said that the mission rewards change a lot. It's difficult to get coins, and he said that among those three options he had, finishing the floor is impossible for him. He wouldn't be able to do it even if escaped from that cave, and the only option left for him was the missions from the tower administrator who gives him, and he starts calling the administrator asking if he was listening. It was obvious, and he asks for a reward for tower coins to complete his mission. The system speaks that the tower administrator said he didn't understand, but next time maybe he'll understand when he grows up. And Silver doesn't understand anything like that administrator doesn't know the coins of his own tower. He gets even more bugged by that word about when he grows up. He asks how old he is there was, but the system says that it was a secret, and Silver asks at least how many years he has left to grow. And the system says that the administrator said, which was at least 300 years old, and he himself goes crazy. Of course, how could he? There was no way to complete the missions and still have to wait 300 years. But protagonist realized that there was no point in complaining. There was no point in being nervous and angry, because he was the one who would lose. But he thinks straight and said that he would prioritize what he needed to do for his survival. And the only item he could buy was corn seed. And he was also thinking that it's not like it was a bad choice. He said it was delicious steamed or grilled. Wow boy, wow, now the guy has me craving grilled corn. That it, bro. He also said that he could die until he turned into flour and made something like bread. And he ended up choosing corn seeds. He gets 200 seeds and ends up looking like that bag again. He puts it in your hand and asks him what he thought. It looked great, and he said they would have to start. But his belly growls. He says that before that, he would have to drill. After a while, the rabbits had already eaten. They couldn't eat anything else because they ate so much. And protagonist realized that that little bee had come back, and he welcomes her again. He said that she had spent a lot of time in the cave those days and asks if everything was okay. She wouldn't go back to her house, but the plate said that if she didn't want to leave, she could stay. He would be happy about that. But suddenly, the girl's eyes, the little bee becomes sinister, and she starts to fly upwards. The rabbit also became hostile. He is getting ready to fight. Something appears up there, and the silver one didn't know what which was. Two Scrooges appeared and told them not to misunderstand, according to the cat. He was not a shameless cat who came to steal food from them. And I'm having doubts that a cat there wasn't normal, besides being a danger there, right? He asks what he came to do there. So the cat ended up jumping up and landing in front of the protagonist. He raises his paw and isolates him, asks if he was the client Park Surjow. He introduces himself as Tio. He was a blender. And that was the big day that the dish found a merchant in the dungeon, a cat. The ready one thinks for a moment about the merchant he had heard that while some people climb the tower, it was possible to find one. But he didn't even imagine it would be a cat. He was saying those bright eyes of his, those chubby soft cheeks, he said who wanted him to knead a bun on him. And Silver said that they really appealed that it was a fraud. And protagonist really liked cats, but Silver came back like that. And he says that he was called together and asks what the cat wanted. The cat said that he found out that the newbie shopped at the seed store, and so he came there to greet him to do business. And the deadline asked him what kind of business. While the cat was going through his bag, he said that there was an item that he would love. But when he was hunting, his belly growled, and he asked for forgiveness because he hadn't eaten anything there yet. And the cat is embarrassed and says that a shameful thing just happened in front of a customer. And the silver one starts to give a sinister smile, and he asks if his name was Teo. He offers a roasted fish. Obviously the cat wouldn't refuse that offer. The silver one starts to swing and says that he knows that I wanted to. But the cat comes back like this and says that he didn't need to. He couldn't touch a customer's food. Or to grab the cat's shoulder and ask if he really didn't want to. He starts talking about the smell of sweet and tender meat grilled on the fire, has a fishy taste. Worthy, no cat could miss that opportunity. And he asks if he was sure he wouldn't want it, because I could stay at that moment. With those words, the cat was drooling. The cat had already devoured the whole fish. The cat said it was so delicious he was full, and Silver said that he had eaten 5 fishes, so he must have been quite hungry. The cat starts to thank him, saying that I received him with so much hospitality, he wouldn't know how to thank me, and I could smile on his face. He told him to relax. He wants to thank him for coming there just to meet him. And the cat told them to go to business again. And Silver said it was 05 coins. And the cat and I asked how protagonist said he needed to pay for the roasted fish, my son. But it wasn't free, my son, it wasn't free. Nothing is free in my world, little kitten. Didn't you say you came to do business here? Everyone is in battle position. And the silver one asks if he didn't just go there to eat fish from your client and still runs away. The cat ends up giving him 05 coins. The pet he was crying because he felt sorry for the old man. Or to say thank you. He was thinking that he got a lot of coins. And the cat was thinking that he went there to get money from the client. But instead, he was the one who lost money on the venture that had already started in the red. And he was determined and thought he couldn't being defeated like that. He has to sell his things. He said that now once upon a time, he asks for the protagonistral. He had to offer he had a bottle, a mini fan, and a hand warmer. And Silver questions here he was the items from outside the tower. And the cat says that then he had realized. He explains that that bottle has magical preservation. And if he put it hot or cold things in it, the temperature would not fall or increase. It was an excellent item, and he explains that that mini fan has a magical enchantment. Whenever you need it, you can press the button, and it will turn on. And the silver asks, "Excuse me," and says that she was sorry for him, and the cat asks what had happened. Or to say that all the items he had brought Ollie was rubbish. The cat gets nervous and asks how come it was rubbish. He explains that those items are all from outside the tower, and asks how he couldn't see their values. Silver says that he was also from outside the tower, and the cat remains without saying a. The plate explains that there was nothing magical about that thing. He explains that it was a thermos bottle. It preserves the temperature, blocking the contact from outside. And the protagonist also says that if the fan turns on for a few hours, it would stop working because the battery would finish. But the cat says that wasn't true. He said that the Karens had assured him that it was a magical item. After a while, that fan it starts to stop, and protagonist said that the battery would run out, and the cat didn't believe it. He said it was impossible. There was no way, and Silver said that I thought he had been tricked by that guy who sold you those things, and the cat was really thirsty. And I couldn't believe it. And the dish I realized that he had even changed the way he spoke. The cat started crying and hitting the floor and said that the guy was a terrible goblin. He wonders why they always cheat on him, and the silver one puts his hand on the cat's back and asks him to explain exactly what he had happened. The cat says he was from the 75th floor. He said it was one of the neutral zones of the tower, and he explained that he admired Amaral. According to he was the most beautiful girl in Aldea Granner. And in that square, he was confessing to Amaral. He said he liked her a lot and asked if I would go out with him. But she said she was disgusted with him. She said those fish were cheap fish, and the kitten asked what she was doing. I worked hard to get those fish, and suddenly a cat came, and he was laughing and caught the hotel's attention. And he said he should meet his place and asked how he managed or used to try to win over everyone's husband. They are surprised that the cat appeared. They said that Oren was the son of the richest cat in the village, but he talks about how he could give a fifth-rate fish for that lady. He said that Teo should at least bring a high-quality salmon as a gift, but he even shouted that Teo Maria didn't like greasy food because she was afraid of getting fat. But Maria, on the other hand, said that the fish was beautiful, and Teo stays, he stays. Orem and Mario were knocked out together. He said they were going to his house eating salmon. Yours even tries to stop them by telling Amaral to wait. He said about all the things they experienced together, his memories, and he asks if none of that had been sincere. He asks if it was all a lie. He said to look into her eyes and swear that she didn't feel it the same. She explained and remembered those unforgettable days. But she takes her paw off her paw and makes a very nervous face, asking what he was talking about. She told him to see himself, calling him a stray cat, my God. According to Maria, she said that she only smiled at him a few times, and after that, he became completely delirious. He continued to follow her even when she said that she didn't like him, and she screamed that whenever she met him, he was a pain in the ass. She said who hated poor cats who smelled like cheap sardines that destroyed our soldier, and he explains to Silver that after Maria was taken by Oren, the video of the richest cat in the village, he decided to run away and become a marker with the determination to get rich and get his revenge. And protagonist had nothing to say. The cat said that he had even bought the ring from the merchant, and the equipment needed to become a merchant using your savings of just 50 coins. He would buy something from the street vendor to resell with his 5 remaining coins. He explains that he found that goblin. He called the cat. He introduces himself as Scarum, and the goblin said that if you had any questions, you could talk to him. After a while of conversation, they were talking about items outside the tower. That goblin was talking about that they were very valuable, and if he took items to the upper floors, he would be able to make a lot of profit. He explains that the creatures there collect these things as some kind of hobby, but the cat is in doubt and asks why he wanted to sell those good things for bargains, and that goblin said that they liked Teo. He said that it was the goodwill of a veteran who wants to train his rookie scorer. But the goblin said that if he didn't want to, that's fine, he could talk to another marker. But Teo told him to wait a little while, and he would buy that goblin. He said who was sweet, so he would give a bonus. He hands over a map with the location of a new seed store customer. Since he is a new member, he would be able to make a lot of profit if he was lucky. And he said that since he was giving useful information, the bill for the snack bar would be covered by the hotel. How naughty Bro and Teo is still grateful, poor thing. Teo was so cute and sad, saying that he had given all his money to the guys because of those items. He had great expectations of being able to sell those items. He almost died of hunger and had a hard time getting there. He throws himself on the floor and says that all those things were rubbish. Furthermore, the customer still took the rest of what he had. He was completely useless, according to him, and he himself was thinking that he was very stupid. But he has an idea. He was thinking that it's a way to get coins in that tower, and then he goes to another one. He asks Teo to calm down, and he asks why he gets excited. Eating that roasted fish, but even thinks he was offering food to pay for it later. He said he wasn't stupid. The door said he wasn't that, he can stay, and he might even consider returning the coins, and the Teo remains hopeful. But the protagonist says that in return, he would have to work together with him. And that's the day he got a partner, a slave in the in case. Theo gets emotional, of course, working together with Froda. The plate explained that he needed a marker that could sell his items, and yours didn't even have confidence in himself, even asking protagonist if he really thought he was good enough to sell. According to Theo, he's not that good because, as he had already told his story, he said who is nothing more than a newbie and a useless scorer, but even gives him a little encouragement, saying that he had a lot of futures. Although he made some mistakes, he managed to convince protagonist to be his business partner, he said, and Theo asks about partner business, and the proto says that they would now be business partners, and he ends up calling all the staff. They had already prepared the place for them to talk. After a while, the proton, a bunny, was drinking some liquid and handing things over while two were shaking them. I know. No, it's hard work. And the dish ends up talking about the things he had bought. Protagonist said he didn't manage to sell them because he was left behind. And now he didn't have any money to start all over again. I didn't have money for any project, in fact, and yours says that because it was true. And Silver said it was exactly why he was saying a business proposal that could be a win-win for both of them. He explains that it was simple. He would take his items and sell them to other people, and I would like to offer a percentage of profits as an incentive. Puss in Boots was unsure about that incentive, so he said that this incentive, he would have to sell above the price he chooses, and that he himself said that it was clear. He could sell it for a much higher price. He even said that he was born with a gift, and he said that he would keep 3 to 5% of the value of the items he sells. Teo was thinking it was just 3 to 5%. He was saying in his thoughts that the conditions were very terrible, and he asked protagonist in his thoughts if he thought he was stupid enough to be fooled like that. And Silver spoke, who had forgotten to tell the most important part. He calls the rabbits to bring their own and says that their agreement would not end there. They would pay with 10 grilled fish or coin equivalent per week. Obviously, Teo is drooling over the fish to be saying that these were the terms and conditions of the proposal that he was offering it when the fish appeared in front of Theo. It was already my son, it was gone, and Silver asked at that moment if he wanted to sign the contract with him. But Theo was trying to control himself and not be taken by emotion because maybe he got it wrong. He was talking in his thoughts, so he could be a smart cat. He couldn't be wrong again, but I think his hunger instinct got the better of our Puss in Boots. He says that if he drops 20 fish, he would reconsider that. And Froda obviously doesn't let it go, right bro? Face that the crazy person makes, and he ends up getting excited and saying that as he is in a good mood in quotation marks, he wouldn't give 20 more. He would give 5 fish more, and Teo stays dead there. The next time Guy is in shock. Now he has 25 grilled fish. He couldn't handle the offer. He keeps looking at those fish, already drooling. And the doorman said that in addition to the weekly payment, he will be able to eat as many grilled fish as he wants while he's there. And then he's done with the cat, and he already had it sold his soul. The gate said that obviously he could eat as much as he wanted, but that face there. See, this one, it's the face of not getting into trouble, and Teo was already deceived. He was already completely dominated by protagonist or Silver. Ask if he had a paper there, and Theo says that out of nowhere, a paper and a pen appear, and the protagonist jaw starts writing, and he tell Teo to sign in that corner. Theo puts his paw on it, and Silver was saying like, go my son, go, and this sign here, sell your soul, that's it my boy, when Teo leaves. Well, he hadn't even read the contract. He was signing a contract and didn't understand what was in it. He even tried get the leaf back, but it starts flying by itself, and it simply disappears. And a system window appears saying what contract agreement, and Silver said that he heard that within the tower, the contract is one of the most important, so much that it could not even be destroyed. And with that, it ended up with Theo. Theo was in a deep depression there. He was sorry for not even reading the contract. He just signed it without see what was there. And Silver was wondering what they did to make it so difficult for me to erase or tamper with. But now he was understanding. He said that this way is more effective and respected. But Theo spoke that way fourth clause. He asked what the hell was that he was asking. What do you mean en Hanha accent? He asked protagonist if he needed to use a cat dialect, because that was a bit shameful, as ready to laugh. And he said that he would understand when the time comes. But Theo said that he couldn't, knowing whether he would do well or not. Still had the first clause of the special condition, because he said that if he sold well, he could finish the contract. But Silver tells him to relax because he would sell well. He was believing in Theo as a salesman, an engineer selling, that's it. And that's it while kneading bread. He was thinking about the salesman Theo, the ingenious one. He said in his thoughts that I liked it. And on the other hand, I was thinking it was very simple. And Theo asked what kind of thing protagonist wanted to sell. And I said to someone else that those were fruit, tomatoes, cherries. Yes, yours doesn't even understand anything, asking, really? Cherry tomatoes, my partner? Or Silver takes one from the plantation and gives it to Theo. Theo is a little afraid, asking if it was really that. He realizes that it increased 0 points of mana for 10 minutes, and he was thinking that if he's lucky, he'll be able to sell it for 0.1 tower coins each, taking away the awakened ones who enter the tower. They don't have the slightest idea of the prices, and he asks protagonist how much he intended to sell it for. And the door said that it would simply be 0.5 coins for each one sold. But even being scared, of course, it was an absurd amount. And he asks if he was crazy or what, because there wouldn't be any idiot who would buy that. But on the other hand, Theo starts to think that the contract would be better that way. It would end if that month's sales were less than 5 coins. Furthermore, he said he could eat fish, and in halfway through the time. And the cat in boots says that since the first sale of the contract, he asks how much he should take. Protagonist says that they should simply take 1,000. He said that he had already prepared the 25 grilled fish that way week. He just doesn't know how he's going to carry all that. But our kitty already had a plan. He said he would put a package on your item. Furthermore, that package had a spell of preservation. Space expansion magic imagines that makes it light. He could keep many of his things, and they would still remain in their original state for a long time. He plays that package that ends up taking everything and simply becomes a bag. That's what Broda thinks is incredible, because he was very good. But at that moment, I was saying that he was going to leave, and he left the cave and was saying goodbye to Sealho himself. A few days later, on the 38th floor of the tower, which is a sinister monster, the giant spider, she was attacking an adventurer. That monster ends up attacking the tank, but he manages to defend. And the wizards take that chance to start casting spells on that monster. And at that time, that tank takes the opportunity to cut off the animal's head. That was the leader of the guild, Vernix, O King. Everyone was applauding him, because for no reason he couldn't. The guy was angry, but the leader told them to stop with the praise, because they needed to get ready to leave. And he catches the attention of a girl named Jessica. He said he wouldn't let her pass that time and steal like last time. But she talked excitedly for him to be cool, saying that she loved him. But the leader says that that girl was difficult, and he was scared back. He asked who was there, but it was just our puss in boots. He raises its paw and draws the attention of humans. He said he would like to show some quality products. And he does that ninja thing because it was in the contract. The guy doesn't understand a talking cat, right? Everyone is impressed to see a cat talking. And even if a cat merchant Theo spoke, it was a pleasure to meet him, saying yum. Those girls said he was very cute, saying yummy. And Theo didn't even know if he was cute, asking. And he remembers that protagonist told him to use the cat's day there, because that would help get more attention from them. And there he understood why Silver had said that. Theo told them, "Please, look at those products." They asked what that was. What it was, because what was written was just a cherry tomato. And the group leader said that if it were selling food, it should be something like bread or meat, because tomatoes and cherries are kind of useless. But Theo said they were very silly because he already knew they would say that. He explains that that cherry tomato is different from the one they know. It's much better. And they ask how is that different? And then that Theo tells them to analyze that item. They didn't even know that it was an item. And when they opened the status of that item, it said it was a magical cherry tomato. And they noticed a photo of it that increased by 0.1 mana points for 10 minutes. But even though it was very low and still priced at 0.5 coins, they think it was too expensive. One guy said he thought he was crazy. That guy said he preferred to buy equipment than spend his coins on it. And he asks people out. But a girl told him to wait for her to say that if she ate that, she would lose 10 grams. And when she says that, everyone looks at her and asks if she would be able to lose weight just by eating that. Everyone immediately begins to be interested in buying them. They wanted to buy a lot of quantities, and obviously, with that noise, it would obviously attract more attention. Theo was talking for everyone to form a line. On the other hand, he was picking cherry tomatoes, and he wondered if Theo was doing well because Silver said that at that moment, he should already be meeting with hunters. Protagonist said that at first glance, magic cherry tomatoes may seem like an item to snort your magic. But here, the tomatoes automatically dissolve 10 g of fat and revitalize the body. It's the best product to lose weight. Besides, it has no side effects, and they are very tasty. So, there is no doubt that it would sell a lot. And he was trusting in the diet of the land. And on the other hand, Teo was impressed that he had sold everything. He sold 1,000 cherry tomatoes. After a while, Ui was looking at his plantation, and he said it should be around 70% maybe. And he explains that it produces 1,000 seeds of carrots he had bought. He had decided to plant, of course. But he said that only 700 really germinated. And while the 200 tomato cherry seeds he decided to plant after the harvest, and only 732 managed to sprout and grow. And he said that the germination rate of corn and sweet potato seeds that he had purchased and planted personally is around 60–70%. The germination rate of carrots and cherry tomatoes is quite similar, and he said it would be great if they germinated more, and he was hoping that it would be better and a lot when he increases your level, or maybe the land inside that cave is not very fertile. But the important thing is he keeps trying. Later, he should be able to find a better way to cultivate it. He said that since there was a Tio to help, they needed to collect as much as possible, and he ends up hearing something and looks back. It was that black rabbit. He threw the torch up, and several piranhas start to come out of the water. And that rabbit, like a ninja, manages to strike several at once, and he ends up falling into a sophisticated pose, and the piranhas soon follow. Then fell to the ground. The building was impressed that rabbit had become very good at hunting, and suddenly that rabbit's body starts to turn blue. It was glowing, and I stopped until I realized that he had leveled up. He puts his hand on his head and congratulates him. He said he had already seen him rising to the next level several times, but this is the first time he saw it happening to him. It is gradually becoming a true hunter, and the rabbit had very high self-esteem. He was even demonstrating himself with his muscles ready. He told them to take a break and drink a coffee or silver. He was laughing. He said that Teo and the goblin who started to leg on him was the Karens, and it looks like he didn't even check, opening the thermal cup, and the Prada said that if Teo sold this coffee, he would maybe spend all his money to buy it. But he was saying that thanks to his stupidity, he got that beauty for free. And Silver said that even if he didn't, there are no lashes to boil water, much less ice cubes to make an iced Americano, and that's already a luxury for him. And he still thanks the little bee for giving him some honey. There, he said it was ready, one Mexican. A combination of soluble coffee dissolved in fresh, cave water mixed with dense honey from that little bee. He said he created the perfect harmony, and with just one sip, That combination can alleviate fatigue and hungry. He starts drinking and says it was very good. He asks if the rabbits wanted to try some, while the little black rabbit was drinking some. He suddenly stops and gives it to that chubby rabbit. Apparently, they didn't like it very much, didn't they? They were smiling and happy, dying there. And Silver said that he thought that rabbits' tongues were more sensitive to bitterness. And he looked it up and sees that little bee. He catches her attention, and she ends up looking, and he realizes that that was a hive. He asks her if she decided to live with him. And I think from the answer, it was yes. Protagonist said it was sad that she had to go back to his house every time for dinner. He could finally feel that they were very much a family, and they were going to have a party that day, according to Protagonist. Suddenly, a mission appears for Broda was supposed to give 10 cherry tomatoes to the tower administrator. And again, there was no reward, and the failure was disappointment, but it had changed. Normally, the failure, he would have to die, but now it's just disappointment, and the dish was already thinking about his evil plan. Deadline was thinking that he began to realize something after seeing his contract with Tio, and the threats like offer me, or I'll kill you disappeared. And he asks with that sad expression. And I, Sprout, ends up giving, and the Proto, until he sees which he had thanked. But Protagonist realizes that he just acted like a kiss ass. The scene cuts, and we are in a city, in some unknown city. A goblin was drinking, and was commenting on Teo. That was the scandal. I asked if Teo hadn't yet turned into an ugly goblin for misery. My God in heaven. I asked if he was talking about that cat, calling him an asshole to Karen, who bought his items last time. The other one there, who was there wearing a cap, he said that the guys were very naughty, because he sold his rubbish to that poor idiot Theo. They speak badly, even Teo da Costa. The guy told me that he had spent all his money buying his items, and despite him, enough time has passed. He hasn't returned to the Merchandise Guild. So he didn't know if he managed to sell or no. And that goblin with the cap asks if he was worried that he would really come back. The guy didn't say that he was a cool guy. He couldn't pretend he wasn't him. And the guy already had a plan. He wanted to buy 1 vase of milk. He would tell about a great opportunity. And then lend him money. He said that this way, the poor their kitty would have to work hard to pay back the money he had borrowed. That is, he would have to fix it. But I knew he wouldn't be able to pay that debt, much less the interest. And in the end, he would become his slave until death. This was the guy's plan, and that bald goblin said that the guy was a genius. The old Scar boasted, saying that he was very close. He said that they still had a lot of time, so there was no need to go after that cat, because one time or another he would appear, they would open a window, and the guy wouldn't say that he was starting to get thirsty. Would take a look at the merchant sales ranking for that day. And that bald goblin says that they usually update those hours or so. And the guys didn't say that they had finally entered the top 1,000. They were celebrating that the guys couldn't reach position 999. And about getting bald, he wasn't even in the ranking. And while he was climbing, saying that it was worth stealing the coins from the kiss ass, he was talking about his thoughts, that he would take a look at the people he would pass. But he got scared when he saw the ranking. I could see the meaning of that. It was simply Teo who was there. Obviously, the guy was getting nervous and furious. Because the cat he tricked you into was in a higher position than him. He banged the table. He said that I was sure he hadn't been able to sell it, and asked what he was doing. On the other hand, Teo was happy, and said that he had come back, saying the plate looks back and asks where he was until he apologizes and says that next time, even if he sells everything, he wouldn't have fun on another floor. How is it mine? Partner, were you having fun for how many days, my partner? Theo said he had been partying for 4 days, and I, Silver, said that Teo told him that it would take at least 10 days to reach 3G on 1 floor. But he had time to having fun for 4 days, even after selling everything. And Teo said he was sorry, and I was thinking that he was pretty sure it would take a few days for him to sell it all. But he was thinking he came back in 4 days, and that meant he had sold everything the day he got there. The Silver took Teo's shoulder and said that if he didn't want to see the scary side of the part, he would ask him the details of the Sellet boy. After a while, Teo explains everything and said that that's what had happened. He's telling me that he only talked to a few of them, and the hunters bought everything. Yes, that's what happened. Theo ends up extending his paws and giving the 50 coins, and the protagonista in his change, saying that he did a good job, and there was his incentive coins. But protagonist says he was the employee, and Teo is scared because he was the salesman, Teo the ingenious. But Silver said he had been demoted. What kind of would he sell? And then kept joking about 4 days without coming back straight away. And he said that if he worked hard next time, he might consider returning it of the position, and also increase the incentive rate to 5%. And Theo said that he understood everything he tried to do become the sales cat worthy, and I, to another question, why he was talking like that. Every time talking in Theo, he said he decided to live that way. Because it seems that humans like it more, and Silver starts to laugh. He said that soon everyone would know his name, but Teo doesn't understand much, and he asks what's that. Silver says that the name of your farm is written in the description of the cherry tomatoes, and so people would see them soon find out who grew the cherry tomatoes. But Teo looks a little embarrassed, and then gets scared. He said in his thoughts that he had screwed up as an old man. He explains that there is a system for beginning merchants that hides the strength and origin of their goods. The policy is made to prevent itinerant traders from stealing the suppliers of beginner traders. And since yours is still a new market, the name of Sejam as a cultivator of merchandise was covered. And Theo was thinking that if the Reddy discovered that he would be very angry, and instead from being an employee, he could end up being demoted to a nobody. And Silver realizes that the cat was very nervous and asks what was happening. Nothing, my partner, pass me the cherry tomatoes, and I'll go over there quick to sell. But Silver tells him to rest as he had just arrived, and he also needed to receive his weekly pay. But the cat said it was better to work. He was very busy that day, and he was thinking he needed to hurry, and removing the name restriction is the only way to do it. He need to get 1,000 coins to become an intermediate level walking market. And the dish was thinking that he was committed, and the Black Bunny confirms. In the city, there were some adventurers gathered in a place. One of them said that it was true, but someone else said it was impossible. There's no way it's true, crazy, that's a lie, boy, are you lying there, crazy? Last time, answer your cell phone, old man. That guy's daughter, who was one of the guild leaders, said that the effect of cherry tomatoes was very magnificent. She explains that her friends tried it, and she asks him to buy more next time. Her father gets emotional. One of those extras asks what had happened to the leader, Dong Shik. That guy's name, he explains that his daughter had had some problems with her diet, and that she loved him. He says that he had bought 20 pieces last time and left the rest to the other members. But he hadn't understood that his daughter would like it so much. And he was regretful because I should have bought everything. And that guy asks if he was talking about those tomatoes that Puss in Boots had sold. That guy says he didn't know why the girls were so obsessed with that cherry tomatoes. He shows his cell phone and explains that God cherry tomatoes to one of the girls he had loved. And he says that now they were dating. And a guy there is surprised and asks if that was true. He said he bought some, he still had plenty, and that guy with a brown coat asked if he would sell them to him. The one in the blue t-shirt says he would offer 50, no, he would offer 100. 11 each. The guild leader said they couldn't continue, so he tells everyone to summon everyone for them to go back to floor 38. At that time, they would have to go now, but that boy says that it could go bad because he wasn't sure that everyone would get together again. But a female appears in front, and that girl said they were ready to go. Those 3 girls who bought several cherry tomatoes from the cat were ready to go back and buy. But we have already prepared the coins from the tower to buy tomatoes. To be said to make the shipment exactly, we are ready to buy tomatoes from I say to defeat many monsters. The group leader tells everyone to follow him, and everyone was excited, of course. Everyone wanted to buy cherry tomatoes, And the leader of the group was thinking that he would buy these cherry tomatoes, and he would be a great father. He would achieve this no matter what it took. He was very confident. The scene cuts, and we are with our Catito. He was still trying to get those 1,000 coins from the tower because, for those who don't remember, he had to get 1,000 so that protagonist's name appears on the products. Theo said that the maximum quantity of tomatoes, you let him keep it in his bag. And if he kept selling it like that, he would have to come back more than 10 times. But try to forget that to concentrate because he had to get as much as possible coins he could get. And he turns around and wonders if that wasn't the place where he had found several humans because there were none there. But suddenly, he finds them, or I found him, he'll know. That guy was shouting that he found you. That guy's girl next to him ends up calling everyone. But they had found the cat, and Theo asks if he was looking, and that guy says it was clear. They didn't know when he would show up, and that's why they were waiting there for 3 days. He asks Theo if he had any more cherry tomatoes to sell. Theo is amazed after hearing him say that they stayed there for 3 days, even longer, just to buy cherry tomatoes. That little guy said if the beer tomato was 0.5 like coins and asks Theo if he was right. Okay, but yours already tells him to stop there, and he explains to those guys that the price had increased. Of course, that guy is surprised because the price had already gone up. Meanwhile, the group leader ends up appearing and asks what all the commotion was happening. That guy tells the leader that the price of tomatoes had already increased, and the leader asks how much it was costing at that moment. Our cat says it was 0.7 coins, and Teo was wondering if the price had increased too much because maybe they wouldn't buy it yet. And that guy asks if that was it, even take 200 coins, my partner. The cat is even amazed, and they start to focus from behind. But they change their mind and start making their moves. And when our kitten Teo realizes there was nothing left, he realized that it was completely sold out. And he sees that even though he had increased the price, 500 tomatoes had still been used up in the can. And the leader of the group asks when he would appear again. The cat says that if he waited for him again in 10 days, he would return there in the same place. And the group leader says that that was the perfect team for him to regroup, prepare again. And he said that they would come back to buy more cherry tomatoes after 10 days. The group leader raises his fists and says that everyone would hurry up as they had to finish the spider quest to get out of Tower E. Everyone was getting ready. And our cat was happy, of course, because he had regular customers at that time. And he was thinking that at this rate, he would be able to collect the 1,000 coins from the tower in a while. And the Theo was thinking that he had to become a mid-level merchant as quickly as possible so he could find out the name of your salesman and go back to being a hot salesman. But someone appears in front of her, and she catches the attention of our Theo. It was a girl. That girl asks another if they really looked alike, and this girl said that they really look similar. But our phone doesn't understand nothing, and he says his name wasn't Mr. Cat, and it was yours. Now he's asking sorry for calling him Mr. Cat, and she introduces herself as Sora, and he says, by the way, what do you mean he looked like something? She explains that he looked like a cat she knew, but he says that she must be mistaken and turns around. According to him, he was the most beautiful cat in the world, and he says that he was busy, so he had to leave. But she asks him for a minute and looks for something in her bag, and she points out something, biscuit of some kind, to the Theo and asks if he would like to eat the churro. He cried some kind of biscuit, cat or something like that from Korea. Cried, what the hell is this woman? I don't eat anything. It's fish arrow when she forcefully puts it in his mouth. He sees that it had an incredible taste, and he asked here what flavor he was feeling. He explained that it really smelled like fish, and he said that it had instantly melted in his mouth. And after a while, he said that he had already eaten everything, and asked if there would be more. And she explains that there were different flavors in front of him. And he raises his paw towards her, and he said if she would give him more to eat because he really wanted it. But she said she would only give him if he took a photo with her. Them. He says he would do that if she gave him everything. After that, he was getting ready to take a selfie, was asking him to pray to the cell phone camera. After that, yours leaves happy and eating her bar, and one of these girls comments that it was the first time she saw someone bringing snacks for a cat inside the tower. And she says he was cuter than they said. And the other one next to her said it was good to see her smiling like that, and asks if she would come back to see him again. She looked at her cell phone excited and said yes, she would come back, of course, she would come back. And they were very cute in the photo. The scene cuts, and we go to the cave. There was a little bunny that was swimming. Of course, the proton was in the middle of training. He was teaching that little black bunny how to swimming. He told the rabbit to relax its body and stretch that green onion tube forward, boy. The guy uses everything for onions, bro. The guy makes onion clothes, onion food, onion tube, onion swimming. It's going to become a onion house, boy. He said that that rabbit was doing very well, and you must be wondering, but what about the piranhas that were there? He explains that he temporarily plugged a hole, but even so, the plate was still nervous, even though he checked that covered hole several times. Who wouldn't be, right? Because any hesitation, there is a piranha on his foot. After a while, the silver tells him to try swimming without that tube. And he says for the rabbit that this was a great development compared to the time they have been training. And the silver one says to him is trying to teach the rabbit because he jumped into the water with so much happiness after leveling up. And there is protagonist. I thought that when he saw it, he was amazed by that scene, and he swore that that rabbit had been eaten by the piranhas. The animal was floating there, and when the silver one got close, he saw that the rabbit was standing still, and the piranhas were already looking, and Mom with him had already fainted deep inside. And I Silver said that just thinking about it would make your heart leapt into his mouth, and the rabbit was there soundly. Hi, chubby rabbit, that cute, bro. My God, Silver starts looking for something in his backpack, and he felt like eating something sweet after play in the water. And when he picks up the bottle, he realizes it was empty. He realizes he had eaten all the honey he collected last time, and he looks at the bee box and realizes that that little bee hadn't left since, who came in, and a few days ago, he was wondering if something had happened to her and him there in the right. He couldn't believe what was there. It was with the baby bees. He realized it had been so long since he hadn't noticed that the number of bees drinking had increased a lot, and they wondered if they were the daughters of Poison, the little bee. He calls her Poison, Poison, that's what he thought. It had been a long time since he hadn't seen it, so he needed to congratulate her on her achievements. And he looked at his plantation and thought about giving a gift when visiting her. After a while, the little bees were looking at protagonist. He called after Zombie, and he catches her attention, asking if she could leave for a moment. He told her that there was a gift that she would like, and the little bees around were furious, and they were ready to attack the fleet until the rabbits fled, and the man shouted for everyone to calm down because there was lime, and the bee from inside hears the noise. He shouted, saying that he wasn't any kind of enemy. Even the rabbit shouted. Little Black Rabbit was already ready to trick everyone and get into a fight there. But protagonist tells him to calm down and doesn't fight. And when Silver thought the bees were going to attack him, after a day, he ends up leaving, and he stays impressed that it was actually her. He didn't even know if it was really her. He asked if it was her after Zombie, and she, from the answer, apparently says yes. She became a queen bee. I'm going to call her Queen, guys. Kunha ends up approaching protagonist, and he couldn't believe it was really her there because the zombie piece was unbelievable. They are the carnivorous insects of the tower. They use their poison for monsters. For even though she may seem cute, she is very dangerous. But our dragon Adam from the tower already knew that. He said no, there is an explanation for their situation, and he was looking for some information in the tower guide. And the Adam said that because while he would leave it aside since it wasn't dangerous, but he would keep an eye on them for now and then ask his grandfather later. And the dragon says that even though it wasn't simple, there was a solution to that. And the proton she was facing the queen, and the plate was surprised that she had become a queen since she was the one little bee. He looked at her with amazement since she looked totally different, and she had definitely changed a lot. She was totally different a little more one night. And Silver said that after that day, she ate nectar from his cave for the first time. And we are explained that every time she ate that nectar, her body emitted a strong odor, and her weight also had increased. And explains that this made the queen bee wary of her in the however. Soon our little bee had understood the queen bee's attitude. The reason for this was because our little bee became capable of laying eggs, and it was at that moment that our little bee decided to become independent. And that's when she made a hive inside protagonist's cave, the safest place she could think of. And on a certain day, while the rabbits were doing their business, she suffered intense pain while she was inside her hive, and she underwent a severe transformation. And then she managed to stay in her current form. And that's how she managed to become the poisonous queen bee that we know now. Not even she believed in it, and the door congratulates her on her having become a queen bee. Silver says that even if the weather is a little unpleasant, he gives a flower as a gift for her. She gets emotional. Of course, no one has ever given her a gift, and she goes towards her own and the goat hugging him. He himself doesn't really understand what was happening, and her bees hear all that situation end up going to participate and hug protagonist, and they start to get in touch with each other against the others. Came this ability in the belly of the chubby old rabbit, and a few days later, the silver one hears a scream of a rabbit or bastard was sleeping while they were working. The bunnies were desperate trying to get up because something had happened, and I thought I could sleep peacefully during that blue moon at that time. And the bunny was pointing at one of the carrots. He shows that it was clearly not a normal or silver carrot, realizes that it was a carrot with the energy of the blue moon. But he didn't expect it would change since she was still small. But he said you were great because he could be there for someone else, you know. And he says they were naughty because that's what they wanted. And Silver said it was okay, he would take it off. He finished, turning the hand and pulling. The rabbits, they are surprised and happy themselves. I realized that it was the size of a glass, and it was a carrot of agility. And as the name already says, the effect was supposed to increase agility by 0.5. Silver ends up getting XP in that one, and Silver realized it was a ranking harvest, and that means if he got more, he wouldn't just win 50, which is normal, but he would gain 70 experience. Silver speaks to the rabbits that it wasn't his, and protagonist thanks them for all their work and says to help him in the future. He ends up giving him that carrot. Dad warns one of his sons that he looked like a cook and plays the carrot up. The little animal, like a ninja, starts cutting it into several pieces, and in the end, he still does the pose of a superhero. All the pieces immediately fall into each of the rabbit's paws, and protagonist says that the rabbit cycle, that cook or something like that, was very good because he managed to cut it into equal pieces. It was surprising, and they start to eat the carrot and the plate. He was taking out a cherry tomato. He realized he had given 5 blue or purple cherry tomatoes, because he says blue but is purple. But what can he do? And protagonist called Adam da Torah, and says that he had asked for that before, and ended up giving it and managed to complete a quest. Obviously, Silver wanted something in return. He said that if he had something to give in return as a reward, it would be great, and a system message appeared saying that the tower administrator said he would think about it and give it to him shortly. Time, and the process asks how come he would think about giving it, and if he can give it. But the plate hears a scream. There was a bad fight going on near him. Silver realized that Teo had returned. He was happy, but at the same time, unlike the Theo, I don't think so. Theo, he said in desperation, calling the dish that had poisonous bees there. And they wanted to attack a silver girl, and told Teo that it was the queen's babies because the queen was zombie. And he explained to Theo that they were not enemies. Meanwhile, the cat was dying there, fighting against her woman, fighting over. Poor guy from the old Theo. The black guy ends up going to get Theo, and hugging him and explaining to the little bees that he was of the family. We're not enemies, and Theo kept saying it tickles. Theo, he realizes that he was very hairy, and starts spitting around. Theo, he was grateful that he helped him, otherwise we were. And Silver already realized that he was now treating him like a brother, right? He says he was just an employee and still, I used to say that they were on the same level. Look, that's evil you see from Telma, leave Telma, and in your defense, say that protagonist said they were families. And Silver said to Theo that first, they had to calculate sales, and he asks for the money for the cherry tomatoes here. Misery. Give me misery. And Silver realizes he had 75 coins from the tower. Theo had really worked hard, Claro, my friend, and Teo ends up taking another bag and says that the humans were waiting 10 days to buy the tomatoes, and so that he sold the tomatoes for another zero. So 2 tower coins, so he had had a profit there, and asks if the teacher was surprised because this was incredible. And another asks if he could turn the engineer Teo engineer to try just 2 coins for Teo, and says that that was his incentive. And he says that Teo worked hard. But until I was sad that he didn't give the title back and asked if he didn't he would give the title back Teo and ingenious. But Silver says that Linda was far from that title, and he calls he's your employee, and tells him to work harder. And the Theo is all finished. And he said he didn't know it would be it's so difficult to become an ingenious Theo. And even then, there were people defending protagonist in the comments. Okay, guys, I don't know, huh? And the dish was thinking that, in fact, he already knew that. He was thinking that the manager of the tower was very useful. And he saw in that window that was in front of him that he realized that the cat was earning money for parts. And he gave another moon cherry tomato as a reward. And he ends up looking to the side amazed. Teo was eating that cry, and obviously, the strange dish. Of course, yours was very happy. And there he goes, the proton Theo. What the hell is this old man? Ah, this here you want, cried old man. And Silver asks where the hell he bought that. Theo explains that he got it from a human after taking a photo with her. And he explains that the flavor was chicken with fish and salmon. And it was very delicious. He even shared it with an old bunny. Look how cute, bro, a chubby bunny, my god. Bro, I can't take it. And the dish was thinking that. This is the guy who gave him that. And the deadline was thinking that there are 2 ways to enter the tower. The first of which is to disappear. That's how he entered the tower in this case, and she leaves unarrived. They bring to the tower they had on hand, and originally, they are summoned to the first floor. So those items they bring are for commerce that helps to climb the tower. And the second way is the hunter awakens, bringing items to the tower. But the maximum that can be brought is 1 kg of some object. But when he leaves the tower, they can take anything without restrictions. Normally, the items are brought by the hunters inside Tower E are simple, like a cell phone, food, cigarette was something very light. And the plate was thinking that someone brought a cry just for a cat. And he says in this case, he had already thought of an idea. He said he was a genius, obviously. Teo already realizes that the dish I was up to something too with a guy laughing like that here come here come yours still offers a he asks him if he would like to eat one of those. Or he keeps looking at the zero and ends up taking it. And he said he was confiscating it. He cried. Obviously Teo doesn't accept it. He asks protagonister because that was his gift was what he had gotten. But Silver told him to stop because he would tear his clothes guys. And I told the defense that that's exactly what he did. Business alone, and took a photo and Silver said that we had special conditions. 3. He said that without permission from Party B cannot have additional customers. He tells the Theo that it was a serious breach of contract. Theo he said he didn't know that. But Silver told him not to be too disappointed. And I told them to talk instead about this from his new customers. Theo asks if he had gone back to being the cat, the ingenious one. And the dish is so naughty which he says he would leave him in that position for an hour. And he said that if he gets along well with exchanges in the future, you can even become the salesman Teo Ongioso for several hours. Poor Teo brother, I'm moral brother. I'm crying here, I'm already in depression. Theo agrees with this lowliness of protagonist. Protagonist takes him by the arms and puts him on his lap. And he tells Teo to sit there. And the dish asked if the heat from the fire was to the Theo's liking. Meanwhile, there was a bunny abandonment. And the others were frying fish. Frying not baking in this case, right? That's it. The dish ends up opening cries and asks if he would like to get comfortable and eat some rain. But of course, Teo would accept. And the rabbit was in the background looking at the Theo. My god, this guy has already sold his soul. This one no longer has a soul. He is not the soul of protagonist go now. And Silver said, "Who is the cutest kitten in the world?" After a while, okay? Asked Teo if he was already sick of crying. We still found him. He said, "Sir, the ingenious Theo said he wanted to eat some fish, and Broda takes 2 roasts, and was already serving Theo." The Silver said that those fish were already cooked and delicious, and Silver took the chance and asked how he had gotten to the 38th floor without even fighting the only monster. And the guy explains that it's because of his license of merchant. And the surprised Silver asks what it meant. Theo explains that was what he was using there. That is an emblem of a trader's license. He says he has to pay annually a membership fee for the trader's license, was an association to maintain that license that he was using. And he explains that the higher level, the more money he needs to pay each year. But he has several benefits are also clear. Teo says that if he has a merchant license, he can use several installations protected by associations. He says that not being attacked, monsters is a specialty of Merchants Association. Silver asks if he could bring hunters to that floor, but Theo says he couldn't do that, and although monsters don't attack merchants, they will still attack hunters. He says that in addition, there is an exclusive shortcut called the Merchant's Pass, and it is obviously only available to Mercador's Claro. And Theo says that if he wants to go to other floors using a shortcut, he would need to have first a merchant license. Otherwise, without the pass, the merchant is impossible to get to the 38th floor in just 5 days. And Silver was surprised and asked which floor they were on. And Theo talks about happiness, which is the floor. Don't deny it, and the 9th floor. I think I said it right. Prada is defeated. How would he get out of it, my son? The guy is on the 9th floor, boys. It's the 90th, and Silver is surprised. Of course, the guy was on the 90th floor, and I even asked if he really didn't know he was on that floor. Crazy how he would get out of there. There was no way. He ended up being defeated by this word, and Theo asks if he was okay because he didn't know what was happening. When our protagonist and Silver say that since he had Theo, he couldn't use Ice Point like the hunters, and he was useless, thinking that Theo could make a 10-day trip. So he thought that place would be a few floors above 38. And Protein, out of despair of course, he couldn't get out of it, nor could Fernando. And while he was frozen, the cat was trying to wake him up. "Bastard, wake up, old man, wake up, resist, resist then. Wake up, you bum, resist," Theo says. Your weekly payment had been reduced, and the dish was thinking it's only been a few weeks since the hunters started climbing level 40. But he's on floor 99. There's no way he can get there that fast. I don't even know if they'll make it there. So it says that in a few weeks, the hunters started to climb to level 40, and protagonist said meanwhile that Theo's time was over. He became the employee again. Theo was amazed that an hour had already passed, and Theo was sad, saying it was a shame. But in the meantime, they were looking for your item, that merchant's accessory, and obviously protect it. You start thinking about evil things. He was thinking about what it would be like to have several hunters in the middle of the Torah forest. And they were saying that they had run out of potion supplies and had no food, they had been injured. They were in a very bad situation, and one of them realized that they would probably die there. But then our hero arrives, our captain, our rabbit and bee employee, saying he was their help. He said it was a marker and asked if they wanted an item. And Theo said they were selling several things. Everyone gets desperate and says that he is the legendary wandering merchant, the merchant of Sagem Tower and Farmer Park, and his mascot Theo, the yellow cat. My God, Sky, they start to buy a lot of protagonist items, and that was what he himself was thinking. They were anxious if he could do this and wash. Silver asks Theo if he wouldn't be able to become a marker like him in this case. But yours ask if he was not from outside the tower. Theo explains that only creatures born inside the tower could become a merchant. Then there was no way he could become, and Silver is furious and sad. He wanted to cry and jump, and Theo says that no matter how bad or cool he can sweat, but he would have to give up this idea, and Silver starts pulling his hair and screaming. He starts screaming that that tower was shit. Rabbits, and even the queen start to look at Silver, which I think I heard something. I saw everyone in the cave was looking at Froda, even the piranhas. Theo jumped on top of the head of the rabbit and says that Proton had scared him for a moment because he suddenly started screaming like that. Maluko and protagonist take a deep breath, and he was thinking that he should have prepared himself to suffer a moment that he decided to enter the tower because anything could happen there, right? And he was thinking about what he could do because he was trapped in the tower. He clenches his fists and says that he would have to live every moment to the most. The scene cuts, and there were two people. Apparently, they were very important. That guy asked about the new item, that popular item among hunters. That girl said it belonged to her brother, one of the members of the Pharynx Guild. She explains that her brother said that he happened to meet a wandering merchant, and he ended up buying those cherry tomatoes. That girl says she couldn't see, but he could because he was a hunter, so he could see the status of that item. Was it Jane or from a pharmaceutical company? And man starts to see that that cherry tomato was magical. And he, Michael McLaren, was the vice president of the food company. That is, they were in a business since she was in the pharmaceutical area. And he was in the food area. And that item was food that she would lose weight, right? And that guy asks what she would do with an article because he had to publish an article about the item. And she asks, if Macon McLaren, the vice president of Gale, the company that controls 39 of the global food market, lost its business perspective because it was making a very stupid question. And he says that even if she is from a pharmaceutical company, if she opens the mouth and says the wrong thing, that wouldn't happen. That would be very careless. She ends up clicking, and an entire article on one page. She had already prepared everything. Obviously, that guy is impressed. And that woman says that as expected, they failed to extract the compound from the item. And she says that the data result they obtained in the short period of research are beyond their imagination. And the guy asks why she shows that. And he asks if that wasn't a business that she alone could monopolize everything. And she says that she needed his Torah agriculture project without success. And he is surprised that she knows this information and asks how did she know that. And she says that he should try to regain the trust of his father, the current president of Gale. She says that the director will elect the next president in the name of the current president who is sick. And she asks him what he thought. And she says that cherry tomato was very appetizing and tells him to try it. He ends up picking it up and ends up biting it. He realizes it was really delicious. He starts laughing, then suddenly stops. Man, it's crazy. You have another one there, boy. You ate mine. It was like one of mine and one of yours. It's connected, but you ate both days, and where's mine? Go into the tower and buy, you bastard.